Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was Shadow Monarch with Harem of RWBY Girls, Part 2. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is Son of the Shadow Monarch by Black Reaper 707. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Over the last 3 weeks, Izuku has been attending Ms. Ublex's class in the early morning. He quickly became her favorite because of his constant participation and asking questions. It also helped that he brought her a thermos of his coffee each morning, which she immediately started chugging. She also loved when he would bring Eri along to learn about the world and would have Eri sit with her for the class, which was the only time she would be still for more than 30 seconds. Otherwise, she would be zooming all around the class. There was an incident where Ruby had called her Ms. instead of Doctor and ended up spilling coffee down the front of her shirt when correcting her, exposing her black bra underneath her white shirt. She didn't notice until Izuku stood before her, covering her with his jacket with a light blush. Her face also seemed to heat up in embarrassment, but she hid it, thanking Izuku and adjusting the coat to conceal her ample bust. The men in the class were angry because they lost the free show, while the women were grateful seeing that chivalry was still alive. After her class, he would go to Port's class and listen to his stories. Izuku would admit that even though his stories could be exaggerated, Izuku did learn something about many Grimm that he had not met yet. He wrote everything down in his notebooks and shared what he wrote with Port before the end of the class. They would discuss what Izuku had written down and what could be improved upon or insights Izuku had that Port found interesting. After his class, it would be lunch. Izuku would sit with either Team RWBY or JNPR. Usually, if he was with one, Eri was with the other. Sometimes he would join Olivia or Glinda to have lunch with them. During this time, Izuku noticed that Jane was acting withdrawn from the group. When Izuku asked about it, she would avoid the questions and try and claim everything was okay. Izuku didn't believe her but respected her wishes and would keep an eye on her to make sure nothing was happening behind his back. After lunch, Izuku would go to Glinda's class and assist with combat training. While still on house arrest, Cardin was still allowed to attend classes. Izuku was happy that this was the only class he had to deal with him. But he still maintained a professional attitude when dealing with him. After that, he would spend time with Olivia, talking about his world over tea or coffee. He would tell stories about his days as a vigilante or listen to stories about her life. Although he always felt she was not telling the whole story, he never asked, thinking it was not his place. On his days off, Izuku and Eri would venture out to go and visit Summer and T when they weren't out on a mission. They would spend the day talking about the past. He learned about their deceased husband, who had died in an accident while on a mission with his team. One of his sisters on the team blames herself for his death because of her semblance, and even though they didn't blame her, she could not get over it. Listening to their story, Izuku would hug them and try and offer some form of comfort along with Eri. It seemed to work as they clung to him, crying their eyes out in grief and sadness. They had been holding it in to appear strong in front of their daughters. Even when they had slip-ups, this was the first time they could grieve properly and not worry about anything. Once they were done, they let go of Izuku, who wiped away their tears and smiled at them, reassuring them. They smiled back and spent the rest of the day talking and telling stories about their families. Now let us take a look at one of Glinda's classes. Izuku's POV. It was my 3rd week being a teacher's assistant. Glinda had decided to have me teach this class today to see how I handled it. I was nervous but excited to see how it went. All the students were present and just waiting for class to start, while Glinda was sitting behind me waiting as well. Not long after, the bell rang, and everyone turned toward me, surprised to see me and not Glinda. Izuku. Hello, everyone. Ms. Goodwitch has requested that I be the one to teach you today to see how I do. So having said that, let us begin. The class looked excited to see how this would go. Meanwhile, Cardin would be giving me a hate-filled look that I ignored at first, but soon the look would turn into a smug one as he looked toward Jane and a rabbit faunus, which I didn't like. Okay. Now, before I start with anything, I have a question for the class. Which is better, strength or intelligence? I asked, looking around the class. No one raised their hand until Cardin arrogantly raised his hand with a smug look. Yes, Mr. Winchester? Cardin. Strength is the most important because you can do whatever you want with enough. That is wrong, Mr. Winchester. Can anyone else answer? I said while Cardin looked angry at having said he was wrong. Glinda looked at me. interested in where I was going with this question. Not long after asking, Weiss raised her hand. The answer is intelligence because you will be a mindless barbarian without them, Weiss said, shooting a look at Cardin with the last word, who returned it. You are close, Ms. Schnee, but still incorrect, I said, gaining a confused look from the class and Glinda. Weiss. What? But that was the only option left. Yeah, teach, I don't see where you are going with this. There are only two options, Nora said, giving a perplexed look that the rest of the class agreed with her. Incorrect, Ms. Valkyrie. There are actually three options, I say, holding up 3 fingers and getting the class's interest. Both said only the extremes of the question, but the third option is one that everyone knows but few practice effectively. Yang. What do you mean teach? Izuku. What I mean is that the correct answer is balance. The class sat in silence, thinking about what he had said, although both Weiss and Cardin still looked dissatisfied. Izuku. Ms. Schnee and Mr. Winchester, you both look dissatisfied with my answer, but think of it this way. In your answer, imagine you are on two sides of a fight. One side has overwhelming strength, and the other is a person so intelligent they can devise a plan for anything. They would be stuck in an endless fight, one breaking through the plans and the other constantly coming up with more plans to slow them down. The class and Glinda were thinking about what I was saying and slowly agreeing. They just needed a final push to accept what I was saying entirely. Izuku. Now imagine what would happen if either the person with strength had the same intelligence as the other or vice versa. How different the battle outcome would be. The battle would be one side and one would easily be able to beat the other. After listening to my speech, the class nodded their head in agreement and had looks of thought as they mulled over what I had said, while Cardin and his group still looked like they disagreed. But what about if you were only able to have one? Lily asked. I smiled at her, causing her to blush. Excellent question, Ms. Wren, I said, smiling bigger at her, causing her blush to deepen. I noticed that the others seemed to be pouting, which I thought was cute. To answer your question, Ms. Wren, that is why you are in teams. Everyone's eyes widened upon hearing this. You all are part of teams so that you can cover each other's flaws and shortcomings. Nobody is perfect. But at the same time, you must still improve yourself because your team will not always be there to save you when you need them most. I looked around the class, seeing that I had everyone's attention. Now, let us get to today's real lesson. You will be fighting. This got a lot of the class excited to see what or who they would be fighting. They, however, were not expecting my answer. Your team will be fighting against Ms. Goodwitch and me. We will split the teams in half. One will face me, while the other will face off against Ms. Goodwitch. The class was looking at me horrified, and Weiss quickly shot up her hand. I gestured for her to talk. Weiss. Don't you think that is unfair? It would be 4 against 1, so you would be outnumbered. She asked, a look of worry crossing her face. I chuckled at the question, her look of concern quickly fading to one of annoyance. What is so funny? Izuku. I am sorry for laughing, Ms. Schnee, but to answer your question, I believe this is more than fair, considering that 1. I am used to fighting multiple people at the same time. 2. Megaseconds Goodwitch is an experienced hunter. I was cut off by a voice talking behind me, sending a chill down my spine simultaneously. I turned back and saw Glinda giving me a lovely smile while a killer aura surrounded her. Are you calling me old Mr. Sung? She asked me, her smile becoming even sweeter at the end. Needless to say, I was shaking in my shoes along with the other males in the room who were praying for me. NN no Ms. GGG Goodwitch IWWW would N never, you are absolutely beautiful and don't look a day over 20. I said, sweat rolling down my back. Her angry aura quickly disappeared, being replaced by one of embarrassment. Her face blushed a deep crimson, and she gave a smile. Thank you, then, Izuku, for the compliment. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the sweat did not stop rolling off my back as I felt several jealous auras behind me. Turning back to the class, I saw Team RWBY and JNPR pouting, which I thought was cute, and some others. Now, to continue, I believe in Ms. Goodwitch's skills to be able to handle multiple enemies. Now we will be drawing to see who goes first against me. A screen appeared with all the teams' names behind me. I pushed a button, and it started to spin. Everyone in the class held their breath, not wanting to be picked besides a few groups. The wheel stopped and landed on Team RWBY. Yang and Ruby jumped up in joy while the other two were nervous. End of POV. Seems Team RWBY will be going first. Please approach the front and prepare, Izuku said, gesturing to the front. As Team RWBY was preparing, I heard someone approach behind me and turned to see Glinda approach. Hello, Glinda. What can I help you with? Glinda. Why are you doing this? You are setting them up for failure. You know that, right? I know, and that is why, Izuku says, smiling wickedly. Glinda's felt her face heating up at Izuku's smile. But that is not the only reason I am doing this. I want to see how far they trust the people fighting beside them and what they would do to keep them safe. You learn a lot about a person from their failures. Ahem, well then, Glinda said, clearing her throat to get her mind working. At least you know what you are doing. Just please don't hurt them too much. I would never, Izuku said, mock hurt in his voice. But he soon got serious again. I will, however, not take it easy on them. I will treat them the same as every other student. Good, now it seems they are ready, Glinda said, pointing behind Izuku. Izuku turned to see Team RWBY armed and ready for a fight. Izuku. Good then. Come on, teach, time to beat you finally, Yang said, slamming her fist together. The others were trying to mirror her confidence. Is that so, Ms. Xiaolong? Izuku says, giving an evil smile again to the group. Their confidence quickly fell seeing that. Izuku seeing this decided to relight the fire form before. Izuku. How about a deal then for you and the whole class? This caught everyone's attention, wondering what the deal could be. If anyone can hit either M's Goodwitch or me, then I will follow any request you give for a whole day for each member. This seemed to bring the fire back to the girl's eyes and made it burn even brighter. It also got the class excited to give it a try. And that is not all. If no one can hit me today, we will talk about it at the end of the class. Once your aura breaks, you are out now. Let us begin. As soon as Izuku said that, Team RWBY immediately went into action, with Ruby using her semblance to quickly get behind Izuku while the others went to the left and right of him while Yang was in the front. Interesting, blocking off all forms of retreat while keeping one in my blind spot smart. Let's see where it goes from here, Izuku said, pulling out a pair of training daggers from his inventory that he and his dad would use. As soon as they were firmly in his hands, he rushed toward Yang, surprising the group as they were not ready for his charge. She threw a quick jab toward Izuku, who dropped low to avoid it. She followed it up by throwing a kick. Izuku, expecting this, was prepared, grabbed her ankle, brought it over his shoulder, and threw her toward Blake, who was moving in to help Yang fight Izuku. Izuku felt something approaching from behind and ducked just in time for Ruby to pass by his head using her semblance again and then dodging to the side to avoid the tip of Weiss's weapon. As she passed, Izuku grabbed her hand, holding the weapon and changing the direction of her charge to where she would run to Ruby full force, causing the two to crash to the ground in a pile. He looked back to where Yang and Blake were and quickly dodged a barrage of bullets fired by the two. Izuku moved into close combat with the two Yang and put up a defense to block the punches thrown at her. Blake, unable to get off a shot, moved in to assist. Izuku, seeing this, kicked Yang away and turned toward Blake. They traded blows, with Izuku avoiding her swipes with her sword while his attacks were slowly building up on the black-haired girl. Her biggest mistake that Izuku immediately exploited was overreaching with her last attack. Izuku took advantage of it and delivered brutal punches to her stomach, followed by a kick. Sending her flying, she tried to get up, but not long after, her aura broke, and she slumped down in defeat. Izuku heard from the sidelines Glinda's voice. Glinda. Blake Belladonna is out. Izuku, not wanting to waste time, quickly started moving toward Ruby, Weiss, and Yang, who were regrouping. He was using Quicksilver to go almost as fast as Ruby. Weiss decided to put a glyph in his path, thinking he couldn't avoid it. He was close to hitting it, but suddenly a mass of darkness shot from a nearby shadow, grabbing Izuku around the waist and pulling him to the side, avoiding the glyph. Brilliant, Ms. Schnee. If it were anyone else, you would have got them with that move if they were moving at that speed. Izuku said, smiling at the girl proudly for her quick thinking. Weiss's face darkened a red shade at the praise, and she gave a soft smile that no one saw as they watched the black mass circling Izuku. Teach, what the hell is that thing? Yang and Ruby said, pointing at the black mass. Izuku looked at where they were pointing and smirked at their confusion and let out a soft laugh. Did you all forget what I said when I told you about my past? Izuku said. His smirk was becoming even more sinister, but one that held no actual malice. The shadows around him started to rise and surround him, moving like living creatures. I am the Shadow Monarch. It only makes sense that I can control shadows at will. The class was silent. Some looked in awe and amazement while others looked on in horror, seeing his control of the shadows and what he could do with them. But everyone in the class wondered what he meant by the Shadow Monarch. The class's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of fighting. They all looked up to see Yang and Izuku clashing fists while Ruby fired long range when she got a chance, while Weiss used her glyphs to attack at speed whenever the two broke apart, switching places with Yang to give her a break. You all are adapting well, but how about we speed things up a bit? As Izuku said that, he used the shadows to grab Yang's leg and launch her at Weiss, causing the two to fall and their auras to crack and shatter. Glinda called out from the sidelines. Glinda, Yang Xiaolong and Weiss Schnee are out, leaving only Izuku and Ruby in the ring. Both walked to the side, sitting next to Blake and looking down. Well, shall we finish this, Ms. Rose? Izuku said, smiling at her. Ruby, on the other hand, looked nervous but stood tall, staring defiantly at Izuku. His smile softened, and he got into a running stance. I like that fire in your eyes, Ruby. Let us finish this now. The two charged at each other and started fighting using their speed. Ruby had a slight advantage but was soon overwhelmed by Izuku's experience. During the fight, Ruby lost her scythe, which was quickly picked up by Izuku, who tripped her with it, causing her to crash to the floor. He grabbed it by the handle, bringing it above his head. The class's eyes widened, thinking he would bring it down on her. Before anyone could do anything, Izuku brought it down, slamming the blade next to her head and using the shaft to trap her body against the floor. He gave her a soft smile and flicked her forehead hard enough for her aura to break. Everyone let out a breath that they didn't know they were holding. Good job, Ms. Rose. That was an incredible fight with your team. You impressed me, Izuku said, reaching down and pulling Crescent Rose out of the ground and giving Ruby a hand. She sat up, rubbing her forehead and pouting, glaring at Izuku. She reached out, grabbed his hand, and pulled to her feet, still giving an adorable glare towards Izuku. Your glare doesn't affect me. It's too adorable, Izuku said, petting her head. She tried to resist but soon gave in and started to nuzzle into his touch, and he swore he heard her purring slightly. He would have to look into that later. Now, you three, come back up here, Izuku said while he stopped petting Ruby, causing her to pout. The others approached, looking at Ruby with jealousy. Now, first, I want to tell you, good job. Weiss. But we lost. What is good about that? Izuku. You might have lost, but you gained something more valuable than anything, experience. Blake. What do you mean? Izuku. Well, Ms. Belladonna, think of it this way. What mistakes did you make when fighting me? The four stood for a second, thinking about the fight and what they could have done differently. Weiss. We allowed you to set the pace of the fight. Correct. What else? Izuku asked, petting her head, causing her face to flush at the contact and causing the other two to pout. Yang. We kept fighting you one-on-one instead of using our numbers to our advantage. Correct, Ms. Xiaolong. Anything else you can think of? He said, petting her this time and causing her to smile while her face reddened at the praise. Blake. We did not use the biggest advantage against you. Izuku looked at her, intrigued by her answer. Izuku. And what would that be? Blake. The fact that you don't have any ranged weapons. At this, Izuku let out a loud laugh. At first, Blake thought she had said something wrong, but then Izuku looked at her, smiling. Correct, Ms. Belladonna. I do not have any long-range options for all the weapons I own, which I should probably fix soon. Izuku said, giving her the biggest smile yet. He walked over and petted her head. At first, she flinched, thinking he would expose her once he felt her ears, but he didn't and just continued. She felt herself relax slightly at his touch. She even heard herself purr slightly and let out a soft meow that she quickly covered her mouth to hide her face going nuclear. She quickly looked up, expecting a disgusted look from Izuku, but what she saw shocked her. He was giving her a soft smile, no hint of disgust seen anywhere on his face. He stopped not long after, and she immediately wished he hadn't. She turned to the others to see if they heard, but besides looking jealous, they didn't appear to have heard anything. She sighed with relief and readjusted her bow, looking forward to where Izuku was standing, the others following her lead. Izuku. Now for the final question before the next person's turn. What could you have done to beat me potentially? The four stayed silent, thinking they could not come up with anything. This question stumped even Weiss. Seeing their confusion, Izuku took pity on them. Would you like me to give you an idea? Izuku asked only for the four to nod. Well, first, what you did initially was a good idea. After that, I would have had Yang handle me in close combat, while having Ruby use her semblance to limit my speed options and led me into traps set by Weiss using her glyphs. Lastly, I would have had Blake remain at a distance, with Ruby supporting her when not trying to keep up with my speed. The four stood shocked with the class at how easily he had devised a plan involving them. This immediately got the class, minus a few, excited to fight Izuku, hoping he could help them with different fighting methods. The four looked at Izuku in awe and were excited to see what else they could learn from him. Izuku. Good, now please take your seats so that the rest of the class gets a chance. The four nodded and headed back to their seats. Sadly they lost, but were happy they could learn from it. Good. Now let us continue, Izuku said, spinning the wheel again for it to land on the next team. That is how the rest of the class would go. Izuku would spin the wheel and fight whoever it landed on. He would alter how he fought each time, using different weapons, keeping them on their toes with each fight. After the battle, he would give advice, and they would happily take it in and return to their seats. After half the class was done, it was almost time for it to end. Izuku had not expected it to take so long, so he clapped his hands, grabbing everyone's attention. Izuku. Now, I had not expected it to take so long, so we will have to continue this another day, but for the final announcement of this class. At the beginning of class, I told you all that whoever hit me, I would follow what they said for a day. Those who had fought Izuku put their heads down because not one of them had come close to hitting him. Izuku. Now, don't look down. It's not over yet. The class looked up, wondering what he meant. Now, first off, we will go to a nearby forest tomorrow to collect sap from their trees. And for the second thing, this deal is not over. This statement confused everyone as to what he meant by not over. They had tried and failed. How could it not be over? Izuku. I see the confusion on your faces. Well, there is still a chance for you to collect the reward. You will be allowed to launch attacks on me outside of school hours, and if you manage to hit me, the reward is still the same. The classes got excited, already discussing with each other plans to win. Now, before you all get too excited, there will be rules that must be followed at all times. The class was focused on the rules, not wanting to jeopardize their chance. First, you are not allowed to harm anyone because of your plans. Second, my room is off limits. No attacks shall happen when I am in there. And third and final is if you hurt my daughter because of your plans. Izuku says, giving an evil smile that sends a chill down everyone's spine. I will give you training that will make you wish you were dead. There is, however, a time limit, which will be until the vital festival starts. Izuku. Having said all that, the class has now ended. Remember to prepare for tomorrow's outing. And have a wonderful day. After class was gone, Izuku stayed back for a while, talking and joking with Glinda, enjoying each other's company and sharing laughs. Izuku would tell her funny stories from his world about his time as a vigilante and the insane shit that happened. On the other hand, Glinda would tell stories about her time at Beacon and the crazy students she had through the years. After they finished talking, Glinda joined Izuku when he left to get Eri from Olivia. As they approached the office, she stopped outside the door and tugged on Izuku's shirt, stopping him. Glinda. Izuku, I have a question for you. Izuku. Yes. Glinda. How are you handling everything? It's only been 3 months since you arrived here. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay. I am perfectly fine, Izuku said, giving a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Glinda didn't like that, so she decided to do something she wouldn't usually do and pulled Izuku into a hug. She felt him stiffen up at first, not moving. Glinda. It's okay, Izuku. You don't always have to be alright. You are allowed to feel sad or lost. Even if you are me, Olivia, and everyone else, we will always help you. Glinda felt Izuku relax slightly. Not long after, she felt him wrap his arms around her waist, bringing her closer and burying his face into her neck. Her face was instantly red, and her breath caught in her throat. Izuku. Thank you, Glinda. I have never been good at expressing myself, given my past. When I first arrived here and started talking to you all, I thought of lying about everything about me, scared that you all would treat me the same as those I once called friends. But in the end, I decided to tell the truth about everything so that if you treated me differently, I would not be as hurt. Glinda, hearing the real reason Izuku told them all the truth when they first met, broke her heart a bit. She could not believe that someone so loving and caring had gone through so much in his life. She hugged him tighter, doing the same as him and burying her face in his neck. She felt him relax even more in her embrace. They could feel each other's breath on their necks, causing the moment to feel more intimate, but neither moved back, not wanting to lose the warmth that the other brought. They stood like that for a few moments until Izuku leaned back, still keeping his arms around Glinda's waist, keeping them close. Glinda followed his lead, leaning back, still keeping her arms wrapped around his neck, staring into his eyes. Anytime you need to talk, come to me. My door will always be open to you whenever you need me. Glinda said, smiling at him, her blush deepening. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku said, smiling back at her and staring into hers. They stood staring into each other's eyes, enjoying their closeness. They soon started moving closer to each other, their lips close to touching. They were so close until the doors they were standing next to suddenly swung open. In shock and embarrassment about what they were about to do, they jumped apart before they were seen. They looked over and saw Eri walking out the door. Papa, are you there? Eri asked, looking around until she saw Izuku and Glinda standing next to each other, both extremely red-faced. Izuku was looking all over the place while Glinda was playing with her hair, avoiding looking at Eri or Izuku. Papa, Eri called out, running over to Izuku, hugging his leg and motioning for him to pick her up. He smiled at her and did as requested, kissing her cheek, causing her to giggle and hug him. Glinda stood next to them, watching their interactions and smiling at the love she could feel from the two. Eri, Papa, what were you and Ms. Glinda doing before I came out? This question caused the two faces to redden again, and steam seemed to come from Glinda's ears. Izuku. Well, Snowflake, Ms. Glinda was helping me with something I needed to get off my chest. Eri. So she was helping you? Izuku. Yes, Snowflake. Eri looked between the two and motioned to be put down. He did, and she walked over to Glinda and motioned for her to crouch down. She did as asked, crouching in front of Eri. Thank you for helping my papa, Ms. Glinda, Eri said, giving Glinda a hug and a kiss on her cheek, shocking Glinda and causing her to smile and hug her back. It's no problem, Eri. I couldn't take seeing your papa look sad, so I decided to reach out and help. Glinda said, pulling back and rubbing Eri's head. Eri gave a smile that lit the room. Glinda pulled Eri back into a tight hug and kissed her cheek, causing her to giggle sweetly. Izuku watched with a smile, enjoying hearing his daughter enjoy herself. He was happy he came to this world at this moment, hearing his daughter's laughter as if she didn't have a care in the world. Come on, Eri, let's get a snack before dinner. Eri quickly let go of Glinda. Looking back at her father with tiny stars in her eyes, she ran before anyone could stop her. Well, that set her off. I better go after her before she gets into trouble, Izuku said, laughing. Glinda stood and started laughing with Izuku. But before I do, I should do this first. Glinda was confused about what he meant. It was quickly answered when Izuku gently grabbed her chin, bringing her close to him and kissing her cheek. Her face blazed crimson, shocked at what Izuku had done. He pulled back from kissing her cheek, still keeping his hand on her chin. Thank you, Lin, for listening to me, Izuku said, smiling at her. Before Glinda could say anything about what had just happened, they heard in the distance. Papa, hurry up, Eri yelled from down the hall. Izuku laughed, hearing his daughter's excitement. Izuku let go of Glinda's chin, turned around, smiled at her, and took off after Eri. Glinda stood there long after Izuku left to get Eri to process what had just happened. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her, causing her to jump. Well, that was unexpected. Glinda turned around to see Olivia holding a cup of coffee and staring at Glinda with a look of jealousy. Glinda. Olivia, how long have you been standing there? Olivia. Long enough to see everything. Glinda's face went a deep red. Maybe if you decided to do that in the future, you won't do it in the middle of the hallway and preferably not outside my office. I would hate for Eri to interrupt again. Olivia smirked while Glinda's face reddened further until she thought of something. Wait, did you send Eri out to interrupt the moment between Izu and me? Glinda asked, looking at Olivia suspiciously. Now, why would I ever do that? Olivia asked, a look of fake innocence on her face. A look of annoyance crossed Glinda's face at her boss's act. But I will say, if you are going after him as I suspect, you better hurry, you're not the only one trying to get his attention or love. She said, turning around and walking back into the office, leaving Glinda shocked but motivated. Time skip brought to you by Chibi Kaizel sleeping curled around a sleeping Eri. It is about to be nighttime. Eri wanted to spend time with Ruby and her team. After making sure he was not interrupting anything, he left her to spend time with them. He decided to take a walk around the school grounds enjoying the scenery. It was a quiet evening. Students were sitting on the grass enjoying the fading light and talking amongst each other when they saw Izuku, and they waved at him smiling. Some would walk up to him, asking questions about how they could improve their fighting styles, which he gladly answered. Others would try and attack him, trying to hit him, but it always failed. He would then talk to them about what they could have done to improve their strategies, leaving them with something to think about. After his walk, he made his way back to his room. As he approached, he saw Jane looking sad outside her door. He walked up behind her silently and tapped her shoulder, causing her to jump. Did you lock yourself out of your room again? Izuku asked, knowing that she had done that before. She turned around seeing Izuku smiling at her. "Ah no, it's right here," Jane said, holding up her key. Izuku. Then why do you look like someone just spit in your cereal? Jane started to say, but she slumped her head. I messed up. I did something I shouldn't have done. Someone found out, and now I think coming to this school was a bad idea. She said, slumping down the wall to sit on the floor, clutching her legs to her chest. I'm a failure. So, Izuku said, taking a seat next to her. She looked up at him, shocked, not expecting that response. She looked up at him, seeing him smile at her. I don't think being a failure is terrible, it just means that you have more experience to pull from when making a decision. Jane sat there still, holding her knees to her chest. She was wondering why Izuku was sitting here trying to comfort her. She wonders if he would still treat her the same if he knew what she had done. Izuku saw her spiraling downward into her thoughts, so he reached over and flicked her forehead, causing her to jump and cover it with her hands and pout at him. Izuku. Stop that, Jane. You will keep thinking yourself in circles and leading deeper into your head. Jane. But what, Izuku? It doesn't matter. Were you not paying attention in class today? You are a leader now. Failure is okay as long as it does not become a habit. Use each experience to learn. I have had my fair share of failures. Even coming to this world is a failure if you want to be technical. Jane. But what if I fail at being a leader or never learn anything from my failures? Then rely on your team and let them make up for your shortcomings, and you learn to make up for theirs. I know you can and will make a great leader. You just need more confidence in yourself. Izuku said, standing up and dusting himself off. He reached out a hand to Jane, which she accepted, and he pulled her to her feet, standing in front of him. Don't let your failures define who you are or who you want to be. Learn from them and conquer them to make yourself a better person. I don't think I can do that, Jane said, looking down. Izuku used a finger to lift her chin to look at him. Then come find me, and I will always help you, Izuku said, giving her a bright smile that lit the hallway. Jane's eyes widened at his honest smile, and before she could stop, she ran toward Izuku and hugged him tightly. At first, Izuku was shocked, but it quickly passed, and feeling her shake while hugging him, he wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close. As his arms wrapped around her fully, Jane felt a warmth she had only felt with her family. Safety. She felt safe in his arms and relaxed at that moment, pulling him closer to wrap herself further in that feeling. Izuku, seeing that she needed this, allowed her to pull him closer and rest his head on hers. They stood there for a few moments until Jane reluctantly pulled back and looked up at Izuku. "Thank you, Zuku, I need that," Jane said, giving a smile that he found cute, causing him to blush slightly. Izuku. "That's good. I am glad you are feeling better now. Do you want to talk about it?" "No, I want to finish this by myself to prove I can do it," Jane said, determination replacing the despair in her eyes. "Okay then, I believe in you," Izuku said, petting her hair and causing her to blush and smile. "But for now, get to sleep. We have a trip early in the morning," he said, turning around and walking toward his room to get changed before picking up Eri. As he walked down the hall towards his room, Jane's scroll went off, and a message from someone popped up saying that they needed something. Jane was still inspired from earlier, ignored the message, and walked into her room with the rest of her team. They immediately thought something was different about her as she walked in, but they didn't know what. Time skip brought to you by Chibi Tank sleeping wrapped around a sleeping Eri. Izuku's POV. The following morning after my talk with Jane, I was carrying Eri, who was still partially asleep, in my arms after staying up late playing with Team RWBY. I was taking her to Olivia's office to drop her off, so I told Glinda that I would catch up with her after I dropped off Eri. So I figured I would stay and talk to Olivia for a while and then use Shadow Exchange to catch up with them when they arrived at the forest. I made a quick stop by Betty's class to drop off the coffee I made her since I wouldn't be in her class, and I am sure if I didn't give her coffee, she would probably hunt me down. I did not want to test that theory at the moment, so I stopped by and gave it to her. After that, I finished making my way toward Olivia's office. As I arrived, I knocked on the door and heard a response from the other side. "Come in," Olivia yelled from the other side. I walked in and saw her sitting behind her desk. When I walked in the door, she looked up and smiled. Standing up, she walked over to where I was standing. "Olivia." "Hello Izuku, how are you thing morning?" Izuku. "I am good, Olivia. How about you?" Olivia. "Better now." "Hello Eri." Eri, still sleepy, gave a half-hearted wave of hello, causing Olivia to giggle. "She seems full of energy this morning." "Yes, she decided to stay up late playing with Team RWBY, and now she regrets it," I said, laughing as well. Olivia held out her arms, gesturing for me to hand over Eri. I did, and once Eri was in Olivia's arms, she adjusted and fell asleep. "Thank you again for watching her all the time. I know you have a lot of work, which isn't helping." "Nonsense. I love this little girl. She is always fun to have around, and now that the school year has started, I have much less paperwork to do, so I have a lot of free time," Olivia said, hugging Eri, causing her to snuggle into her. I saw her look down and smile at the small girl in her arms. Although her look held a sense of sadness that he could not place. Within that look, she looked much older than her age would suggest. "Izuku. Is everything okay, Olivia?" Olivia. "Yes, why wouldn't I be?" Izuku. "Well, when you smiled at Eri just now, you seemed sad." When I said that, her eyes widened, and she looked on the verge of panic. Whoa, clam down. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I was just worried about you. This seemed to calm her down slightly. "It's fine. Just brought up some bad memories," Olivia said, seeming to hold Eri tighter as a form of comfort and rubbing her back. "It's fine, I understand," I said, smiling at her and walking over to give her a reassuring hug that she melted into while still in my arms. I said, "Just know if you ever want to talk, I am here. It's the very least I could do for you after all you have done for me." Olivia. "You don't owe me anything." Izuku. "Yes, I do, but we'll say I don't, for your sake." This caused her to giggle into my shoulder. I felt her wrap an arm around my back, hugging me back. Olivia. "Thank you, Izuku." Izuku. "Nothing to thank me for, just doing what I think is suitable for those I care about." When I said that, I felt her smile and hold me tighter, ensuring she was not crushing Eri in the hug. Izuku. "I hate to ruin the moment, But I should get going, don't want to be late, and I don't want my boss to get mad at me for skipping out on my job. As I said, she stepped back and smiled at me. You have awful timing, Olivia said, laughing lightly to not wake up Eri. I joined in, knowing it was a horrible time to say that. I think your boss would understand. I don't know, she can be kinda mean when she wants to, I said, smirking at her. She gave me a look of false hurt. But it soon dropped, and she gave a soft giggle. She walked over to a couch in her office, laid Eri down, and put a pillow under her head. Izuku. Thank you again for watching her. You don't have to keep thanking me, Olivia said, turning back and walking towards me. Izuku. I know I want to, though. Olivia. Oh, then I have just the idea for you to make it up. Oh, and what would I started to say but was interrupted when she threw her arms around my shoulders and pressed her lips softly against mine. My mind shut down for a second. This was the last thing I had expected her to do. I felt myself leaning into it, wrapping my arms around her waist, closing my eyes, and slowly accepting her affection. We stood there for a couple of seconds, holding each other until I felt her move back. I opened my eyes to see her smiling shyly at me, a deep blush on her face and a mischievous look in her eyes. Olivia. I think that was repayment enough. Don't you agree? While I am not arguing that at all and will happily agree. I must ask, why? I asked, feeling my face still heating up. Olivia. Izuku, we both know multiple people are trying to get your attention romantically. I look away, pretending I don't know what she is talking about. She was not buying it and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at her. Take this as throwing my hat into the ring and getting a step up on the others. But I do believe you should be on your way. Can't have you being late and your mean boss punishing you now, can we? Yes, I believe so, I say, clearing my throat and taking a step back from her, smirking. Ahem, and I must say to be kissed by someone as beautiful as you is definitely a win, Olive. Before she could say anytime else, I used shadow exchange, was engulfed in shadows, and replaced with the shadow soldier I kept in Glinda's shadow. Olivia's POV. When Izuku disappeared into his shadows, I was even more shocked when one of his soldiers replaced him. It walked over to stand in front of me. I reached out to touch it, seeing as this was my first contact with one besides Igris. As I was about to touch it, the shadow disappeared, sinking into my shadow on the floor. This brought back a memory of when he said he kept a shadow on everyone important to him. I felt myself smile, and I walked back over to where Eri was sleeping, gently picked up her head, and moved the pillow, taking a seat and putting her head on my lap. I started running my fingers through her hair, soothing her and causing her to smile. I gave the small sleeping girl a loving smile and continued what I was doing. As I was sitting there, I was brought back into the past long before any of this. I wished I had done something different to stop what had happened, but in the end, I didn't think I could have changed anything. I felt my smile turn into a sad one as I continued to pet Eri's hair softly and started humming a song. Izuku's POV. I was surrounded by darkness for a split second while I traveled miles to where Glinda was with the class. I rose out of her shadow silently behind her. She was busy looking at her scroll, watching something on it. I felt myself smirking mischievously and silently walked up till I was just behind her and leaning next to her ear. Izuku. What are you looking at? Ah, Glinda yelled, jumping away and spinning around, getting ready to fight, only to see me standing there laughing while holding my stomach. Izuku. Glinda yelled, marching over to me, and started slapping my shoulder. I was still laughing while trying to defend myself from her assault. Izuku. Sorry Lin, I had to. You were so vulnerable. That doesn't permit you to do that, and how did you get here in the first place? She asked me, slapping my shoulder one last time before stepping back and pouting. Izuku. I swapped places with the soldier I kept in your shadow. You can do that? Glinda asked, looking surprised. Izuku. Yes, I can, although it has a cooldown before I can do it again. Glinda. Interesting. Now for my second question, why does it look like you have lipstick on? My face instantly heated up, remembering what had happened just a few moments before. Glinda seemed to notice this and had a contemplative look on her face trying to piece all the pieces together. Izuku. WWYYUSCWH. What happened was, before I could finish, realization crossed her face, piecing it all together, and she shouted. Glinda. Olivia kissed you, and don't even try lying to me. Not seeing a way out of this, I looked away and nodded my head, accepting my fate, whatever that may be. I could feel the jealousy radiating off Glinda, and before I knew it, I heard the sound of steps coming toward me. I expected her to start hitting my shoulder again, so I turned to face her to fend it off. But the last thing I expected her to do was to grab my tie, pull me toward her, and kiss me. Not wanting to be outdone by her boldness, I grabbed her hips and pulled her close, causing a surprised yelp from her lips that were still pressed tightly against mine. I felt her wrap her arms around my neck and lean further into the kiss, not letting up on the intensity. We stood there for several seconds, locked against each other, until we finally parted, breathing heavily. Her face was heavily flushed, and I felt my face flush as well. I refused to back down or not make my feelings known, Glinda said, breathing slowing down, but her face was still very red. She started fixing her dress and hair to distract herself from what she had just done. I gave her a soft smile, seeing the bold woman turn into a shy schoolgirl. I was about to say something to her, but then a soldier reported something that turned my blood cold, and a look of pure fury etched itself on my face. Glinda noticed this and thought I was mad at her for what she had just done. She was about to say something to me, but I took off at a full sprint, heading deep into the forest before she could. The only thought I had in my head at the time was, Izuku. Thought, please let me make it in time. Let us take a look at what the soldier told Izuku. Jane's POV. I was walking around the forest trying to find my team after we had accidentally split up when looking for the sap. I was depressed. Cardin had messaged me this morning that if I did not respond to him, he would take what he had learned to Ms. Ozpin when we got back from the trip. I didn't respond, accepted my fate, and would not allow him to control me. I was slowly making my way around when I heard the sound of voices. I thought it was the rest of my team, so I headed in that direction. As I got closer, I recognized the voice and quickly hid. Not wanting to be spotted, I moved as silently as I could till I saw a clearing in the woods, and what I saw sickened me to my core. Cardin and his team were standing around the body of a passed-out girl. Her clothes were ripped and torn in multiple places, and they talked about something that made my stomach turn. So, who gets to go first? The random asshole asked, looking at Cardin, who was looking wickedly at the nude girl. Obviously, I get first dibs, seeing I am the leader of our little group, Cardin said, walking forward and messing with his belt buckle. I was about to turn and run to try and find someone to help, but I stopped. The first thing that came to mind was what Izuku would do in this situation. I knew that even outnumbered, he would stand up for what was right. I swallowed my fear, reached for my sword and shield, and pulled them out. After both were firmly in my hands, I stepped out from around the tree I was hiding behind, making my presence known to the group. Stop, Cardin, I said, stepping out and raising my weapon. The group turned around, saw me ready to fight, and started laughing. Cardin. Look who it is, guys. It's that green-haired bastard's little slut. What are you doing here, slut? It's not like you can do anything without your little protector here to stop me. Jane. It doesn't matter. I will stop you. They laughed harder and reached for their weapons. If that's the case, we'll just have to break you first and then take our time with you, then send you back to your little protector broken, Cardin said, walking towards me, smiling evilly. I gripped my weapon tighter and prepared for the fight that was about to happen. They were about to charge when a black shadow rose from my shadow and attacked two of the four, leaving Cardin and one other for me to face. Izuku's POV. I was running at full speed, using Quicksilver to go even faster. I hoped I could make it in time. I was getting closer to where they were fighting, and my blood was boiling more and more as I got closer. As I arrived, I burst through the bushes, and what I saw made my blood run even colder than before. The rage slowly building in my mind died quickly and collapsed into a bottomless abyss. Jane was standing there, bloodied and her clothing torn, but still standing, their sword and shield in hand, fighting off the two people in front of her. The two in question were standing there laughing, enjoying drawing this out and making her suffer. I felt myself grinding my teeth, and before they could launch another attack, I jumped forward, kicking Carden in the face and launching him back, then spun in the air, landing another kick at the other and sending him back with Carden. End of POV. After his attack, Izuku stood in front of Jane, his back towards the four, his soldier taking a spot beside Izuku and watching the four as they regrouped. Jane looked up at Izuku and gave a bloodied smile that Izuku returned, hiding his rage for the time being. He was doing an excellent job of hiding it until Carden opened his mouth. Carden. Look who it is. The green-haired bastard himself came to save your little slut. Too bad you came so soon. I was hoping to break her and send her back to you, used and broken. Maybe I should go after those other little sluts you hang out with. They all look like they would be fun to break, especially that little red-haired one. Izuku ignored him as he spoke. He looked over Jane, ensuring that none of her wounds was life-threatening, and pulled out 2 jackets. One covers Jane, and the other covers the girl on the ground. You bastard, answer me when I am. Shut up and wait, Izuku said, turning around and pointing at Carden, no longer being able to control his rage and using bloodlust to its maximum output, making sure to avoid Jane with the skill. All over the forest, they felt the rage and bloodlust coming from deep within the forest. Those who were fighting Grimm suddenly saw them running off. Animal faunas felt their instincts screaming to run away and hide. If one looked close enough at certain people's shadows would notice that they were violently shaking. Carden and his group, currently experiencing the full force of Izuku's bloodlust, could only stand there with a look of pure horror on their faces. Izuku, still releasing his bloodlust, turned around and looked at Jane, who looked on the verge of passing out from exhaustion. He walked over to pick Jane up in a princess carry, causing her to blush but accept it without complaint, and snuggled into his arms and let out a soft sigh, and before she knew it, she fell asleep in his arms, too exhausted to keep her eyes open. Izuku smiled softly at the sleeping woman in his arms and summoned 2 shadows. Izuku. Iron, Igris, come out. The 2 shadows kneeled in front of Izuku. It is good to see you again, Iron. We will have to catch up later, but for now, take these 2 to Glinda and watch over them once you arrive. Also, Igris, please inform Glinda what has transpired here. They nodded, with Iron going over and gently picking up the girl on the ground and Igris taking Jane from Izuku's arms. She stirred slightly when she moved from his arms and settled down, not waking up. Once the 2 women were securely in the 2 knights' hands, they took off running, making sure not to jostle the 2. When they were on their way out, even though he was terrified, his pride temporarily overwhelmed it, and he jumped forward to stop the 2 shadows from leaving. Where do you think you are going, free? Carden yelled, raising his mace only for his face to be grabbed suddenly by the face and thrown back, slamming into a tree and cracking it. His group ran over and helped Carden stand up and look at who had thrown him. What they saw froze their blood. They saw Izuku standing there. A black substance seemed to be coming from the skin of his face as he looked at them with pure rage in his eyes. Izuku. I am going to butcher you. Hi. Glinda was pacing back and forth where Izuku had left her standing after running off. She was worried. Glinda had never seen him so furious and ready to kill, and he took off running. Not long after he ran off, she felt so much bloodlust that it almost brought her to her knees in fear. She was worried for her students that were still out in the woods. She was about to go and start looking for them when a group came running out of the woods. Soon more and more groups showed up, being driven out of the woods by the overwhelming bloodlust coming from them, their instincts telling them to flee. Ms. Goodwitch, what was that just now? A random student asked, running up to her. I don't know, I was just about to go find out, Glinda said, starting to walk towards the woods only to stop as 2 shadows came out from them carrying 2 people covered in 2 jackets. Jane, Team NPR and RWBY called out, running over to the shadow, followed by another group running to the other girl, quickly taking her from the giant shadow and looking at him suspiciously. Glinda recognized one of the shadows and made her way over to him. Igris, what the hell is happening? Glinda said, running up to Igris, who was setting down Jane and starting on first aid on her. What happened to these 2, and where is Izuku? The one over there was about to be assaulted by Carden and his group. They were held off by Ms. Jane here, Igris said, his deep voice sounding even more grave than usual. My lord arrived just in time to save her when she was about to pass out after putting up a resistance with one of the shadows he kept in her shadow. Igris, where is Izuku? Glinda asked, getting even more worried, not for Izuku but about what he would do. Team NPR and RWBY were also worried for Izuku but were focused on treating Jane. They, however, kept an ear on Igris's and Glinda's conversation. Those fools have angered the one person whose rage they should fear the most, Igris said, looking up into Glinda's eyes. They have my sympathy. I doubt their deaths will be painless. What do you mean their deaths? Ruby asked worriedly. Igris, the bloodlust you felt belonged to my lord. He has not been this angry in a very long time and killed the person the last time he was. Weiss. What? Who was it that could have made him this mad? The person who experimented on his daughter, Igris said, looking up at the gathered group after finishing his first aid on Jane. The group stood there in silence, not liking what Igris had just told them. Igris made his way over to the other girl to start assisting with treating her wounds. Her group was suspicious when the shadow came over, but he paid them no mind and got to work patching up the unconscious woman under the watchful eye of the other three. We now go back a bit after Igris and Iron left. Izuku stood there unmoving, Black Whip slowly coming under control as he got his rage under control enough to control its movement. He kept a close eye on Cardin and his group's movements, not wanting them to try and run off. There would be no escape for them. Izuku had made sure of that, having already ordered the rest of his shadows to surround them. What the fuck is that shit, you freak? Cardin yelled, pointing at the dark mass coming from Izuku's skin. Why would I bother telling a bunch of dead men anything? Izuku said, his voice cold with anger. What was that freak? Cardin yelled, motioning for his group to surround Izuku. Seeing as they could do nothing, he allowed it to happen. Ha! Got you surrounded now, freak. What are you going to do all alone? Once we are done with you, we are going after those little sluts you are always hanging around. Izuku looked around at the four men surrounding him and slowly brought his hand to his face at the stupidity of this group. He knew Cardin was stupid but did not think he was this stupid. This is how I know you don't pay attention in class, Izuku said, still holding his palm to his face, showing clear annoyance and rage. What was that, you freak? One of Cardin's lackeys shouted. I said now I know you don't pay attention in classes, Izuku said, looking up with clear annoyance and raising his voice. Otherwise, you would know this stupid tactic would not work against me. Right now, I am only surrounded by fear and dead men. Hearing this, the four brought their weapons up, ready to attack. And just because I want to break your spirits that much more if you are going to surround someone, you use overwhelming numbers like the ones around you now, Izuku said, gesturing towards the forest around him. The four looked around, and their hearts sank in fear at what they saw. All around them were moving shadows, eyes glowing purple, and clear hatred could be seen in them aimed directly toward Cardin and his group. WWWH what th the FF fuck AA or THTH those? The one standing behind Izuku yelled, fear evident in his voice. Those, Izuku said, not bothering to look around. Those are what awaits you if you try and run away. As I said, none of you are leaving here alive. As soon as Izuku said that, a tendril of Black Whip shot out from his exposed forearm, wrapped around the person standing to his left, and jerked him towards Izuku. Izuku quickly brought out Kasaka's fang and ripped it across his throat, dropping him to the floor and letting him bleed out. The other three stood there shocked, not expecting the sudden attack or the violence from said attack. The group stood there watching their teammate slowly bleed out on the ground at Izuku's feet, unable to do anything because of their fear. As the three stood there shocked, Izuku did not give them time for rest as he quickly moved to the person standing on his right. He pulled out Night Killer and stabbed with full force into his chest plate with all his strength. He broke his aura on the second stab, drove the blade deep into his chest, and ripped down and pulled the blade out. A fountain of blood sprayed from the man's chest, covering Izuku's face. In a swift move, Izuku flipped the blade and drove it into his neck, pulling it out and leaving the man to collapse to the ground holding his neck. The third, seeing how quickly and brutally Izuku killed his two team members, dropped his weapons and ran toward the woods. In his fear-addled mind, He believed that the eyes were just an illusion and that he could hide from the crazed killer they had unleashed once he was there. Once in the woods, he was about to find a place to hide, but it was useless. The last thing he saw was a giant bear coming toward him. He had just enough time to scream a blood-curdling scream, and then the bear was on him, mauling him. Carden stood there, the last of his group still standing. He was shaking in his boots. He just watched as two of his teammates were brutally killed in rapid succession, and the third ran away only for as soon as he was out of sight, a blood-curdling scream be heard and the sound of an animal attacking something. His fear increased as Izuku turned toward him, his blood-covered face not hiding the hatred attached to it. "Come now, Carden, where did all that bravado go from earlier?" Izuku said, slowly making his way toward Carden, making a slow circle around him. "You were so sure of your power before. What happened?" "Shut up, you monster!" Carden yelled, his mind breaking. Not wanting to accept anything, he would bring up his mace, shaking and pointing it at Izuku, who had stopped circling Carden and was looking at him. "You are nothing but a monster. A freak of nature that should just be killed off along with the rest of the freaks." At this point, Izuku had enough of Carden and slowly started walking toward him. The closer he got to Carden, the more the mace started to shake in Carden's hand. As Izuku got within striking distance, Carden would suddenly pull back his arm and yell. "Die!" Carden screamed, bringing the mace down toward Izuku's head, only for Izuku to pass right by him. "Consider this my last act of mercy." Carden heard Izuku say the words sounding slow to him. Izuku stood there as Carden collapsed to the ground, his head rolling off his shoulder as his body hit the ground. Izuku turned around, not giving Carden another thought. His dark mood brightened slightly as a familiar shadow came out of the forest, followed by the rest he had stationed around the clearing. Walking out of the forest was Tank, who walked up to Izuku and started rubbing against him. Izuku started chuckling at Tank's antics and started petting him. "It's good to see you as well, Tank," Izuku said, giving the big bear a warm smile. "As much as I want to continue, I need to return to the class and Glinda. Mainly, Glinda, she is probably worried because of how I left her." Tank nodded his big head in agreement. "I need you to do something for me, Tank. Make it look like a Grim attacked them and destroyed the area." Tank nodded his head and got to work, leaving Izuku standing there. "Once you're done, come back to my shadow." Tank raised a paw in acknowledgement and dragged Carden's body off in a random direction. Izuku turned around and started walking back toward where the class was gathered. On his way back, he found a stream and washed himself to get the blood off his face. Glinda's POV. "I was pacing back and forth after the conversation with Igris. I was worried about Izuku. The bloodlust that had been so stifling had died down not long ago, causing everyone to sigh in relief. Not long after the bloodlust disappeared, I heard a rustling from the forest. I tensed, expecting a Grim to come from it because of all the fear from the class. However, I let out a sigh of relief when Izuku walked out of the woods. I started to walk over to him but was beaten by a red blur that blew past me, heading right toward Izuku, followed by 6 others. End POV. Izuku had just walked out of the forest and saw Glinda start walking toward him with a look of relief on her face. He started walking toward her, only to be tackled by a teary Ruby, who buried her face into his chest, hugging him tightly. He wrapped his arms around her and started petting her head, causing her to calm down. Not long after, Izuku was tackled to the ground by 6 other people who hugged him just as tightly as Ruby. He felt himself giving a soft smile to the 7 of them. "I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy this, but I think you should get up. You 6 are crushing poor Ruby," he said, giving a light chuckle. The 6 looked down to see Ruby crushed against his chest and quickly got up, letting her breathe. Glinda made her way over during this group hug and stood before Izuku. "I am required to ask, but have you seen Mr. Winchester since I am told you were the last to see him?" she asked him, raising an eyebrow. "I have no clue the location of Mr. Winchester or his group. After seeing them attack Ms. Ark, I quickly confronted them. I first ensured Ms. Ark and the other young lady were safe and sent them away to be treated. After they were gone, I confronted them. They tried to attack me in an attempt to silence me. But before anything could happen, we were attacked by an Alpha Ursa. They took the chance to run away, leaving me to fight it alone. Izuku said, looking into Glinda's eyes, not breaking contact. So that is what happened, Mr. Sung? Glinda asked, staring back into his eyes, unblinking. Yes, ma'am, that is what happened, he said without hesitation. Very well, we will send out a search party to locate him so that he can pay the price for his actions, Glinda said, nodding her head and pulling out a scroll and talking to someone on it. Izuku turned around and walked to the group where Igris and Iron were standing. The two knelt before him as he approached, shocking the students around him. Izuku. Igris report. The two were in stable condition and should awaken any moment. I treated their wounds. None are life-threatening, but I believe the young lady there might have a concussion. Igris said immediately, still bowing. Izuku smiled at the shadow. Thank you, Igris, and good job on tending to them. Now on to you, Izuku says, looking at the kneeling Iron, who started to sweat. It's good to see you again, Iron. I have missed your company. The big shadow looked up sharply only to see Izuku smiling at him. Iron seemed to tear up at this and quickly stood up, bringing Izuku into a tight hug and lifting the smaller man off the ground. Igris would look down, sighing at Iron's antics, and Izuku would laugh and, with effort, get an arm loose and pat Iron on his armored shoulder. Izu, who is this? Nora asked, pointing at Iron. Yay, he looks badass. Yang said, slamming her fists together. Izuku motioned for Iron to put him down, which he did. This he is Iron. He was my father's and now my shield. Iron teared up again hearing this, and Igris patted his shoulder. What is he good at? You said Igris was your best swordsman, so what is he? Ruby asked, rushing over to stand in front of Iron, who looked down at her and then flexed his arm. She jumped up, grabbed it, and hung from it, causing Iron to laugh heartily. Izuku. Well, as I said, he is my shield, him and another one named Tank. Blake. Tank. Izuku. A giant scared bear, and don't ask about the names. My dad was never good with names, although they always worked out in the end, so who am I to complain? Lily. Did you say a giant bear? Izuku. Yes, would you like to meet him? Before anyone could answer, we heard a groaning coming from the ground. We all looked down to where Jane was sleeping just a moment ago to see her waking up. She sat up, rubbing her head. Where am I? Jane asked, looking around. What happened? Jane. The women yelled and crouched down, hugging the yellowed-haired woman. Pyrrha. Oh my own, are you okay? Nora. Are all your parts in working order? Lily. Did that bastard do anything to you? Yang. If he did, I would break his neck. Their questions went on for about a minute, with the girls not giving Jane time to answer because as soon as she was about to answer one, the group would quickly ask another. Seeing the distress on her face, Izuku would clap his hands loudly, getting their attention. Izuku. Girls, I know you are worried but give her some space to breathe and answer your questions. Jane looked at Izuku with gratitude for having stopped the onslaught of questions from the worried girl. The group backed up some, giving Jane some space to breathe. She sat there for a minute. She answered the girls' questions and ensured they understood she was okay. They were talking while Izuku stood in the back, letting them speak before speaking himself. Ms. Ark, I believe it is my turn to speak now, Izuku said. Jane looked up at him as he spoke, not liking the tone of his voice and noticing that he used her last name. Jane. Yes, sir. Now, what you did was stupid and reckless and could have got you and the other girl killed or worse, Izuku said, crouching down and looking into Jane's eyes. She looked down, sad about what Izuku was saying. Nora. Hey, Izu, don't you think you are being too hard on her? Lily. Yaku, give her a break, please. The rest agreed with Lily. Jane. No, guys, he is right. What I did was stupid and, before she could continue, Izuku lifted her head and put a finger to her lips, silencing her face lit up red. The rest of the girls gathered were a little jealous but let it slide for the moment. Izuku. If you all would have let me finish, there was going to be a but. Everyone. Oh, Izuku. Sigh now, as I was going to say, it was stupid, but I am proud of you for your bravery and the fact you stood up for what you believed was right. Izuku gave her a soft smile showing that he supported her decision. Her eyes lit up, and she started to tear up. She lunged toward him, clutching onto him and crying into his chest, releasing all the fear she held when fighting for her life and dignity. Izuku hugged her back softly, rubbing her back. The others around her see this and join in on the hug, giving her more comfort. Not long after, Izuku felt her body relax and heard her softly snoring. He chuckled softly and motioned for the others to back up. The group backed off, and Izuku gently sat Jane down, pulling out a shirt from his inventory and putting it under her head. Glinda had finished her conversation and walked back over as Izuku stood up, leaving the rest of the group sitting next to Jane to watch over her. Glinda. Well, there will be a search party out here within the hour to search the woods. We were told to gather the student, get on the bullhead, and make our way back to Beacon. Izuku nodded and walked away to check up on the other girl involved. After he was finished with that, he gathered up everyone and explained what was going to happen with Glinda. Although the whole time, he felt like he was being watched from somewhere off in the shadows. When he sent out his shadows, they didn't find anything out of the ordinary, which did not sit well with him. Let's see who was watching. Cinder was standing deep in the shadows, avoiding the shadow soldiers that Izuku had sent out whenever they would come close. There were several close calls when they would walk under where she was hiding, but she managed to give them the slip before she could be seen. Cinder knew she had to report what she had seen back to Salem immediately. She was still shaken by what she had witnessed. From the stories Neo told her, Izuku was very kind. But it felt like she was standing in front of Salem with the amount of bloodlust he was releasing. Cinder also wondered about the abilities that Izuku displayed and what they all were, and how he got them. Although Cinder would admit to herself that she would have done worse to the disgusting group had he not stepped in. Cinder would also admit to finding it hot how he mentally broke him before killing him, although she felt his death was too quick and easy. She shook her head, her face heating up, banishing the thoughts and focusing on the task. She had to report to Salem with what she had discovered about Izuku. As she ran, her thoughts returned to the green-haired man, her face holding a slight blush. Cinder wanted to learn more about this individual and what made him tick. She would find out one way or another. Time skip brought to you by Chibi. Izuku holding a crying Eri while Igris, Iron, and Tank surround the person who made her cry. Cinder had just arrived back at the base they were currently hiding out in. She was anxious about her call with Salem. She did not know how she would react or what she would request next. Cinder entered a room with a floating orb with tentacles hanging from it. Cinder approached it nervously and stood before it. Soon, the order came to life and showed a picture of a Salem. Salem seemed to be pacing back and forth, agitated. Cinder cleared her throat, gaining the white-skinned woman's attention. Her black and red eyes latched onto Cinder's figure in the orb. "What do you want?" Salem asked, glaring at Cinder. Cinder felt beads of sweat roll down her back at the glare leveled at her. "Cinder, I have come with a report on the boy named Izuku-san." This statement immediately caught Salem's attention, her posture becoming more focused. "Salem, and what could be so important that you would contact me?" "Well," Cinder said. She would then explain what she had witnessed not long ago in the forest, how Izuku would mercilessly butcher 4 students who were about to assault another student. Cinder then explained how Izuku showed multiple abilities that had not been seen before or reported. By the end of the report, Salem was sitting in her chair, hand on her chin, thinking the more she learned about this boy, the more intrigued she became with him. Cinder brought Salem out of her thoughts by asking a question. "Cinder, Master, what did you seem so concerned about earlier?" Salem looked up, staring at the raven-haired woman in silence for a moment, and then sighed. "Salem, sigh, we seem to be having a problem with these new types of Grimm that are showing up more and more frequently, and I have no idea why. Not to mention this boy who brought back dead Grimm, and they now serve him. Something is happening behind the scenes, and I don't like it." "Cinder, what should we do then, Master? Shall I capture the boy so we can get his answers?" Salem, "No, let us not use that option yet. We do not know the full scale of the boy's abilities. So let us not anger him at the moment but keep tabs on him and continue looking for the maiden so you can claim the other half of her power." Cinder bowed her head in acknowledgement, and the orb cut the link. The creature floated off, leaving Cinder thinking about all that was said during the meeting. She wondered what was going on and how it connected to Izuku. I will find out one way or another, Cinder thought, walking away into the darkness. Back to Izuku. A search team arrived shortly after Glinda had called and explained the situation, and the student had returned to Beacon with Izuku asking Team RWBY to pick up and watch over Eri when they got back. They happily agreed and said they would bring her to Jane to cheer her up when she awoke. The search team had asked Izuku to come with them to lead them to the last place he had seen Carden and his group, which he did. Once they arrived at the area where Izuku fought, the sun was starting to set, and he pointed towards the clearing, where the ground was torn up and a few trees had fallen. What the hell happened here? One of the searchers asked, looking at Izuku. Izuku. Fought a huge grim. Random. Oh, so which way did this trash run off to? That way, Izuku said, pointing in the direction Tank had dragged him off. The searchers nodded and headed that way, leaving Izuku and Glinda alone in the clearing. Izu, be honest with me. Are we going to find these four alive? Glinda asked, looking over at Izuku. Are you sure you want the truth? Izuku asked, not meeting her eyes. Yes, Glinda said without hesitation. Izuku lowered his head and sighed. Izuku. Sigh, then no. You will not find them alive, they are most definitely dead and gone. Glinda. Why? Izuku looked at her now and explained everything Carden and his group said from when he had first arrived to his last moments. As he told her everything, a look of horror slowly spread across her face that only deepened as he continued. Izuku. That is why I could not leave him alive. Oh, I can't believe this, Glinda said, bringing a hand to cover her mouth. But aren't you worried that they will be able to connect you with his death? And don't you think he deserves a second chance? No, I don't, Izuku said, looking directly into her eyes. I will always be the first to give someone a second chance and believe that they can change even the worst of people. But if you threaten those I care about, you won't live to make them suffer. Glinda saw the determination in his eyes at that statement, leaving no room for argument. Glinda felt her heart skip a beat and her face heat up, seeing how far Izuku would go to ensure that those he valued would be safe and happy. Her thoughts returned to earlier when she pulled him into a kiss and his response. And as for your first question, don't worry about that because, Izuku was cut off by shouting from the woods. Random. Call off the search. We found them. Glinda and Izuku looked at each other, and he motioned for her to lead the way, and he would follow behind. They both made their way over to the yelling. As they approached, they were stopped by one of the searchers. Random. Sir, ma'am, I don't think you should see this. They look to have been mauled by a rather large grim. The guys have the area marked off, so it doesn't get disturbed while we collect everything. Okay, but I want a report about everything found while you were processing the area. Glinda said, looking at Izuku from the corner of her eye and seeing him unbothered by the news of Team CRDL, and try and be quick about it. We don't want more Grimm showing up. We will be heading back before you. Yes, ma'am, the man said, turning around and walking away, leaving the two alone again. Shall we head back? Glinda said, turning towards Izuku. Izuku. Sure, Glinda. Then let's head back to the bullhead. Izuku. No need, I have a faster way to get back. What would that be, Eep? Glinda let out a slight sound of surprise as Izuku grabbed her waist and pulled her close. Her eyes widened in wonder as shadows rose to engulf the two. In several seconds the two were standing in Olivia's office. Oh my, the two heard someone call out. They turned around to see Olivia standing behind her desk. Izuku. Sorry for popping in Olivia without permission. It's fine, Zuku, Olivia said, hand to her chest over her heart. As she settled down, she got closer and saw Izuku and Glinda standing close together, his arm wrapped around her waist. Well, don't you two seem close, Olivia said, a hint of jealousy in her voice at how close the two were. Glinda looked down, seeing Izuku holding her close, and she looked up, smirking at Olivia. Izuku looked slightly embarrassed and moved to let her go, but before he could, Glinda grabbed his chin and kissed his cheek. Thanks for the ride, Izu. Now I suggest you head out to Eri while I report everything to Olivia. Glinda said, shooting a smug look toward Olivia. Izuku nodded numbly and started for the door. While he was passing by, he stopped and looked at Olivia. "Thanks again for watching Eri today, Olivia," Izuku said, giving her a bright smile causing her to blush deeply and smirk at Glinda evilly, whose eyes widened. "There's no need to thank me, Zuku. This will be more than enough," Olivia said, walking over towards Izuku and wrapping her arms around his neck, bringing him into a deep kiss, shocking Izuku and causing him to blush. Before he could act, though, she broke it, moving away and smirking at both Izuku's shock and Glinda's jealousy. "But I do agree. I think you should go so I can get the report," Olivia said, licking her lips slightly, a hungry look in her eyes that sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. Before anything else could happen, Izuku quickly excused himself, walking out of the room, leaving the two women staring at each other, one a look of jealousy and the other a look of smugness. As the door closed behind him, he breathed a sigh of relief and felt his face cooling down. He took a deep breath to steady his nerves and started walking towards Team RWBY's dorm to pick up Eri, thinking they were there. As he arrived at the door, he knocked on the door. No one answered, so he knocked again, slightly louder. Still no answer, so he opened the door slightly and peeked in, not seeing anyone, but the light was on. He opened the door more and was met by a wide-eyed Blake in her night clothes and ribbon in her hand, getting ready to put it on to hide her ears. "Sorry," Izuku yelled. Seeing the anger on her face, he was going to shut the door. "I was looking for Eri and thought she would be here." "Stop," Izuku heard Blake say and immediately stopped. "Come in here now." Not wanting to anger her more, opened the door just enough for him to slip in, but not enough that someone passing by would be able to see Blake if they passed by the door. Izuku stood there back against the closed door, not avoiding eye contact with a furious Blake. "Well, what are you going to do now?" Blake said, raising a book that was nearby and threatening to throw it at Izuku. "Izuku. I'm sorry, what?" I said. "What are you going to do now that you know for sure that I am a foul?" She started to yell, only for Izuku to rush over and cover her mouth, causing her to blush but maintain an angry look. "Shish, I suggest not yelling that when the wall might have ears that you don't want to hear this," Izuku said, raising a finger to his lips. Blake slapped away his hand and hissed. "Blake. And why do you care?" Her question confused Izuku. "Izuku. Because you care. Is there any other reason?" His response shocked Blake. She took a step back, seeing the honesty on his face. "Blake. That can't be your only reason. Blake, I have known from the moment I met you that you were a Faunus," Izuku said quietly, shocking Blake even more. "Blake. How? And why didn't you say anything?" "Izuku. The bow helped hide them, but when you get excited or an unexpected sound occurs, they twitch rather adorably, and the bow covers most of it, but the most observant will notice it. As for why I didn't say anything, it is because it was not my place, and you seem to want to hide it." Blake stood there in shocked silence, not believing what Izuku was saying, but the honesty she saw on his face was undoubtedly real. She felt herself tearing up slightly. She looked down, clutching the book she was going to throw at Izuku to her chest like a lifeline. Part of her wanted to believe him, especially after everything that had happened since school began and before that. A part of her was scared, and she didn't want to be hurt again. She heard Izuku slowly walk over to her, and she flinched when she felt his hand on her head. He gently rubbed the spot between her ears, causing her to relax slightly. But as soon as he began, he stopped and took a step back. Blake looked up and saw Izuku smiling at her gently. "Izuku. If you ever want to talk, my door is always open for you, and know that if you ever want to tell your teammates what you are, I will support you." Blake stood there silent, still clutching her book, as Izuku turned around and walked toward the door. As he arrived, he turned around and looked at her. "Also, between you and me, I think the cat ears suit you. They make you look adorable," Izuku said before quickly slipping out the door and leaving a blushing Blake. She smiled softly as she put the book down, looked in a nearby mirror, and looked at her ears. She thought about what Izuku had said, but her fear took over, and she put her headband back on, covering her ear. She is not ready to expose herself to her teammates yet, as she still doesn't fully trust them. Izuku walked out the door, leaving Blake alone with her thoughts on what he said. Once the door was shut, he gently leaned against the door, bringing a hand to cover his eyes, and let out a sigh that one would swear held the world's weight. He rubbed his hand down his face, standing straight, and walked to Team JNPR's room to see if Eri was there. He approached the door and knocked but didn't receive an answer, so he knocked again but still no answer. Izuku let out another sigh, and after what happened last time, he opened the door without someone answering. He was very hesitant to go through that again. Izuku was left with only one option if he was to find Eri, and he was afraid to use it after what happened last time. But regardless, he swallowed and closed his eyes, leaning against the wall and focusing on the soldier that he kept in Eri's shadow at all times. His dark vision was immediately engulfed by bright light, and what he saw made his face red, and he regretted his decision immediately. In front of his eyes were a naked Ruby and Yang. They were washing Eri, who was humming happily, getting her hair washed. Izuku was captivated by the sight of the two. Their skin was smooth, and one could see the cords of muscle they had developed over years of training. Izuku was breathless at the two's beauty. He suddenly returned to his senses and dropped the connection with the shadow. He was embarrassed and ashamed of what he had done, even by accident. Izuku stood up from the wall and walked toward his room to get what he needed and take a bath. After he was done, he walked back toward Team RWBY's dorm and knocked. He heard scrambling behind the door, and it was quickly thrown open, and he was met by a speeding white rocket. "Papa," Eri said, rushing into Izuku's legs. She looked up at him and gave a bright smile which Izuku returned. "Snowball," Izuku said, picking her up and kissing her cheek, earning a giggle. "How did you know it was me out here?" "Eri. Big sis Blake said you were here earlier, so I figured you would be back." "I see that as my brilliant daughter for you," Izuku said and looked over to Blake. "Thank you for that, Blake." She nodded her head, not looking over at Izuku. He noticed that she had on her bow and gave a sad smile looking at her, but accepting her decision looked back towards his daughter in his arms. "Izuku. So, how was your day with Ms. Olivia?" "It was so fun, I learned so much from her. She even let me go to Ms. Betty and stay with her to learn more about history," Eri said, stars in her eyes and pumping her arms in excitement. Izuku was chuckling and happy that Eri seemed to enjoy herself in this new world they called home. "Izuku. I see. Then I should see Ms. Betty when I see her again." "Are you going to stand out there, Izu, or are you coming in?" Yang yelled from inside the room, causing Izuku to chuckle. "Yes, Yang, I will," Izuku said, stepping into the room and shutting the door behind him. Once he was in, he looked around at the four and gave each a small wave and smile, which three returned with a slight blush on their face. The only one who didn't was Blake, as she was still looking away and reading her book. "So, were they able to find that?" Yang started to say, then looked at Eri and changed what she was going to say. "Evil person." Izuku, seeing them all looking at him now, sighed, took a seat on the floor, and leaned against Yang's bed, setting Eri between his leg and covering her ears. "Eri. I can't hear anything, Papa." "Good, you don't need to hear this yet, Snowball," Izuku said, uncovering her ears for a second and then recovering them, causing her to pout, which the five thought was adorable. "As for your question, Yang, the group was found dead." The silence in the room was deafening as the four sat looking at Izuku with mixed emotions on their faces. "Weiss. Was it you? Izuku. Would you like the truth?" "Weiss. Of course." Izuku looked at her, seeing the resolve in her eyes. All he could do was sigh. "Izuku. Sigh? Fine, but before we continue, can someone get Jane and her team?" "I will," Ruby said and rushed out of the room before anyone could say anything. She returned just as quickly, followed closely by Team JNPR who, when seeing Izuku, looked relieved. "Lily. Izuku, it's good to see you're back. What happened to Cardin and his group?" Jane flinched slightly at the mention of his name and rubbed her arms. "Izuku. Take a seat and I will tell you everything." The group nodded and took a seat. Jane sat on Izuku's right while Lily sat on his left. Nora and Pyrrha sat in front of him, leaning against Blake's bed, who was sitting up now and looking at Izuku along with everyone else. Izuku, not wanting to sit with his hands over Eri's ears the whole time, grabbed Yang's headphones and put them on Eri, who started to bob her head to the music playing. "Izuku. Now, to get everyone on the same page since Team RWBY already knows. Cardin is dead, along with his team." The four that didn't know gasped in shock, although Jane looked slightly relieved. "Weiss. Okay, now that we are all on the same page, answer my question. Was it you?" Yes, Izuku answered without hesitation and looked directly into Weiss's eyes. Why? Weiss yelled, looking at Izuku while the others stared at Izuku in shock. Weiss, calm down. I am sure Izu had a good reason, right? Ruby said, trying to calm her teammate. Weiss. No, Ruby, I won't calm down. What possible reason could he have for killing him? I know Cardin was a horrible person who deserves to be locked up for life but death, don't you think that is too far? How about we ask the person in question instead of going right for blaming him right off the bat? Pyrrha asked, with Lily and Nora nodding in agreement. While Jane was still sitting in shock, staring at Izuku. Weiss, unable to argue with that, sat down in a huff and stared at Izuku. Fine, what possible reason could you have for your actions? Weiss asked, taking a seat and staring at Izuku, who was undisturbed by Weiss's outburst, fully expecting it to happen. Izuku. The answer is simple. I saw no other way that did not end with someone I care about getting hurt. All their eyes widened. Izuku then explained how Cardin talked about breaking Jane and coming after the rest of them. I will always say people deserve a second chance, and I know you all are strong enough to protect yourself. Still, knowing him, he would use underhanded tactics to get at all of you and do unspeakable things, and I could not take that risk. Weiss sat there silent, head down, feeling ashamed of her outburst now, knowing that Izuku didn't only do that for Jane but for the rest of them. She was about to apologize to Izuku when the group all heard a yawn. They looked down and saw Eri nodding off in Izuku's arms. I should put Eri to bed, and the rest of you should go to bed as well, Izuku said, standing up with Eri and taking off the headphones, handing them back to Yang, who accepted them. He walked toward the door and stopped looking back at the gathered group. Think of me as you will, but my place in life is not as a savior, contrary to what people believe, but as the demon who takes care of others' problems, so more don't get hurt. Good night all of you. Izuku said, then walked out the door, leaving the group in silence, contemplating what Izuku said. Izuku left the room, not looking back, and walked toward his room. Eri slowly fell asleep in his arms. They arrived at the door to their room, and Izuku opened it, walked in, and shut it behind him, locking it and letting out a tired sigh through his nose. Izuku heard light snoring and looked over to see Eri entirely passed out and snoring lightly, which he found adorable. He walked over to their bed and gently placed her down to not wake her. She stirred slightly but soon settled in, and he pulled the blankets up, and she snuggled into them and drifted deeper into sleep. Izuku smiled down at the small girl sleeping without a care in the world. He pulled the covers back, got under the sheets with Eri, and pulled them up. In her sleep, Eri scooted over, snuggled up to his side, and went back to sleep. He smiled and wrapped an arm around her and tried to go to sleep. 3 hours later, Izuku lay in his bed, unable to go to sleep. He decided to get up and go to the roof, unable to think of anything else. He slowly got out of bed so as not to wake up Eri, who was still sound asleep. Izuku heard her stir as he got up but soon fell back asleep. He let out a sigh of relief and slowly walked out the door. Izuku walked through the halls of Beacon. It was eerie to him how the halls were silent and dead when they were loud and alive during the day. But he found it comfortable and continued to walk towards the roof. Once Izuku arrived, he walked over to the edge and leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. Even with his past, he always found being in high places comforting. He pulled out a cigarette from his storage, lit it, pulled in a significant drag, and blew it out, smiling into the night. He stood there for several minutes smoking and pulled out another when one went out. You know smoking is bad for you, right? Izuku didn't bother turning around and continued to pull the smoke into his lungs. Ignoring me won't make us go away, Izuku. Izuku let out a sign, a puff of smoke coming with it. Not like it can kill me. I am immortal, after all, isn't that right, Nana? Plus, this is my special blend. All the benefits, none of the drawbacks, even smells good. Izuku turned around, looking at the group of gathered people. In the lead was a woman with raven black hair down to her shoulders. She wore a skin-tight suit with yellow gloves, boots, and a white cape wrapped around her shoulders. Behind her stood the rest of the vestiges that dwelled within OFA. Hello, 10th. It is good to be able to meet you properly, finally, said a man with long white hair. Izuku. You as well, Yoichi Shigaraki. He gave Izuku a soft smile. Now, what can I help you with? Izuku asked, pulling in another breath of smoke and releasing it toward them. Toshinori. We wished to talk to you so, shut the fuck up, Toshinori Yagi. I was not talking to you, Izuku says, glaring at him and Izumi, who was hiding behind him. Toshinori. Now you listen here, I didn't teach you. Izuku. You're right. You only taught me how to be strong on my own, Izuku says, his glare intensifying. I was just a child, and you and the rest of your family destroyed me, ruined me. The two shrieked back, seeing the barely controlled anger directed at them. Izuku, calm down, please, Nana said, walking over and standing before him to break his eyesight with them. Izuku sighed and turned around, still glaring off into the night, the cigarette's tip burning an angry red. Izuku. So why are you all here now? Yoichi. Well, after your rage broke the seal you put on OFA, we thought it was best to come and talk to you. If you are looking for an apology for what I did, you might as well return to OFA. I will only apologize to Banjo for using his quirk in a way he would not like, Izuku says, sighing. Won't hear a complaint from me. The bastard got what he deserved and should have done worse to the fucker. Banjo said with a laugh, only to get slapped on the back of the head by N. Oh. What was that for? N. You're a hero. You can't support murder. Banjo. No, I'm dead, so I can do what I want, and I know most of you agree that the bastard got what he deserved. Nana. I mean, he's not wrong, he did deserve it. Toshinori. Master. What, Yagi? Nana said, shooting a glare at the man. He backed down at the glare from his master, not saying anything more. Whether he deserved it or not is not why we are here. We came to say hello, nothing more. If you ever wish to talk, call our name, and we will be there and more than happy to talk. And with that, I will take my leave, Yoichi said and disappeared with the second and third users. See ya around, kid. Don't do anything I would do, Banjo said, smirking at me. If some of the stories I heard were true from when you were alive, that is a very short list which probably got shorter when you died, Izuku says, turning around and laughing, causing him to blush in embarrassment. He disappeared with a huff and stuck his middle finger up toward Izuku, making him laugh harder. Be safe out there, kid, N said, then disappeared with Hikage, who smiled at Izuku with a sad look. Leaving Izuku there alone with Nana and the trash family. Toshinori. Son, I am not your son Toshinori Yagi, Izuku yelled. The shadows around him shook violently and seemed to shrink away. My father was Sung Jinwoo. He was the one who took me in when I had nothing. He was the one who saved me after you broke me, and I tried to kill myself. Toshinori and Izumi's eyes widened upon hearing this, and Nana covered her mouth, tearing up. They had seen in his memories what Toshinori had said to him, but shadows blocked them out whenever they tried to look at what happened after, and no matter how hard they pushed against the shadows, they could not break through. Izuku. So you, Toshinori Yagi, will never be my father. There must be some way for you to forgive us, Izumi said, tears in her eyes. Look who finally speaks, the disgrace of a sister, Izuku says, clapping his hand, cigarette hanging out the side of his mouth. Izumi started to cry slightly. Toshinori. Hey, you can't say. Izuku. Shut up. Izuku. Izuku's head snapped to the side, looking at who had just talked and saw Lily and Ruby standing in the doorway. A look of fear and concern was etched on their faces. They saw their friend talking to himself. Izuku took a deep breath to calm his nerves and let it out, grabbing the cigarette and putting it on the ground. Izuku. Ruby, Lily, what are you doing up this late? Ruby. I was going to get a midnight snack when I saw Lily standing outside your door. I asked what was wrong, and she said she had to ask you something, but you were not answering, so I asked her if she wanted to join me, and she agreed. Lily. After that, on our way back, we heard yelling and followed it to find you standing here yelling at thin air. What's going on, Izu? Are you okay? Izuku stood there momentarily and then collapsed to the ground with his back against the railing. The two rushed over, thinking something was wrong, but stopped when they heard laughing. Izuku. Ha 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 ha, everything is fine. Just the stupidity of the situation made my legs give out. As for your question, Lily, what is going on is I'm having a conversation with a bunch of dead people, two of which were my ex-family. This statement only worried the two women even more, thinking that the person they liked was going insane. They crouched next to Izuku, looking at him closely, making sure everything was all right. the look of worry never leaving their faces. Izuku. Quit looking at me like that, you two. I am not going insane. It is a cost, and Ruby, you know about this already. Ruby. I do? Chuckling. You probably weren't paying attention because you were too busy stuffing your face with cookies. But when we were brought in before Beacon, I told you, Glinda, and Olivia about getting a quirk from my ex-sister, Izuku said, laughing gently. Ruby pouted only to have her head petted by Izuku, which she melted into, causing Lily to giggle but look at the two with a hint of jealousy. Toshinori. You are not allowed to tell them about OFA. What if they tell someone, and that person tries to steal it? Will you shut up, Toshinori Yagi? Izuku said, glaring at the ghost with a look that could freeze water. Unlike you, I trust these two with my life if need be, and not to mention that I am possibly the strongest person on this planet, so no one can force me to do anything. What if they take someone you care about hostage? Toshinori said with a smug look. Izuku. I put enough shadows on the people I care about that they can buy time until I arrive, not to mention the people I care about are strong all on their own. Toshinori. But what if... Nana. Shut up, Yagi. It is Izuku's decision what he does. If he decides to tell them, we can do nothing about it. Toshinori. But master. Nana. Shut up, continue, Izuku. Finally, Izuku exclaimed, throwing his hands up in annoyance while the two crouched women looked on as Izuku continued the conversation with the people only he could see. Lily. Well, since you seem to come to a decision, can you tell us what's coming on? Izuku. Sure, well, long story short, when I was in the final battle back in my world, my ex-sister passed on a quirk. Lily. I remember those. You said it was like a semblance but with a type of drawback. Correct, Lily, Izuku said, reaching out and petting her head, earning a smile. Izuku then goes on to explain the story of OFA and AFO and how because he is the 10th holder and quirkless, he can access all the past users' quirks if they allow it. Izuku ends the story by saying that he sealed it away because he didn't want to deal with the spirits that resided in OFA, but during the fight with Cardin, he accidentally unlocked the seal. Lily. So what you're saying is that because of you taking this quirk, you now have 9 other spirits living in you, and they can communicate with you at their pleasure? Izuku. Yeah, pretty much. Ruby. That sounds exhausting, so what are you going to do now? Well, now I am going back to my room and sleeping. It has been a long day, and now I am exhausted. Izuku said, standing up and dusting himself off. He reached out a hand towards each woman, which they accepted, and he pulled them to their feet. By the way, Lily, I was wondering what were you doing outside my door? Well, I was worried after you left so quickly earlier. I decided to come and check on you to ensure you're okay. Lily said, looking down embarrassed and tapping her fingers together. Thank you for your concern, Lily. I am much better now, Izuku said, smiling at her, causing her to blush and give a small smile. Ruby looked at the two with jealousy and jumped on Izuku's back, hugging his neck. Ruby. Izuku exclaimed in surprise. Ruby. Izu, is it okay if I sleep in your bed like I did when you stayed with us before Beacon? Izuku. You mean when you and Yang would sneak into my bed at night? I don't know what you're talking about, Ruby said, looking away and whistling, but answer my question. Izuku. Sure, do what you want. Yay, Ruby said, dropping down from Izuku's back and jumping up and down in happiness. Izuku smiled at her childishness and how she enjoyed the little thing in life. Lily looked at the happy girl with a hint of jealousy but mustered up her courage to ask Izuku if she could join. Come on, let's go. I am tired now, and Nana, if you ever want to talk, don't hesitate. You can tell the others that as well. Izuku said and turned around to walk away. Before Izuku could go more than a step, he was stopped by two things. The first was Lily, who grabbed his shirt sleeve, tugging it. The second was Toshinori yelling out. Toshinori. What will it take for you to forgive us? Lily. Would it be okay if I joined you too as well, Zuku? The sound of the two talking at once confused Izuku for a moment, but after his momentary pause, he processed what the two said. Izuku first looked at Lily, who was looking worried, seeing how long Izuku was taking to answer. Sure, if you feel comfortable enough, I don't mind you joining, Izuku said, smiling at her warmly. Her face brightened up immediately, and she returned the smile. As for you, Toshinori Yagi, Izuku said, his warm smile fading quickly into an icy glare. I'll tell you when I will forgive you. I'll forgive you both when you, Toshinori Yagi, forgive AFO for killing your master, your wife, and your daughter in front of you. The day you forgive him is the day I forgive you. Never speak to me again, or I will rip your soul from OFA and cast it into the void where it should have gone since the beginning. And sorry, Nana, for bringing up your death. He gave the woman a sympathetic look which she returned with a warm smile. Nana. It's fine, Izuku. I understand why you did it. Izuku. Thank you. Let's go, you two. I am tired. It's going to take some getting used to you talking to thin air and not being crazy because of it, Ruby said, jumping back onto Izuku's back and wrapping her legs around his waist, laying her head on his shoulder. I agree, it is quite weird knowing you can see and talk to ghosts and not be crazy for it, Lily said while looking at Ruby with jealousy, wanting to be in her position. Yeah, well, try being in my shoes, Izuku said, leaving with the two women, leaving the three ghosts standing on the roof. Toshinori looked down at the roof along with Izumi, who had tears running down her face knowing that Izuku would never forgive them. Nana. Quite crying, you two. You're the only ones to blame for how he treats you. Toshinori. But master, we are sorry for what has happened. What else could we do? There is nothing you can do. What has been done is done, and nothing will change that. You must live with your choices and respect Izuku's wishes. Nana says before disappearing, leaving the two standing on the roof. There has to be something we can do, Dad, to gain Izuku's forgiveness? Izumi said, looking at her dad with a desperate look in her eyes. I don't think there is, sweetie. You heard Izuku. He will never forgive us. Toshinori said, looking down, causing Izumi to tear up even more. Let's go, Izumi. Izumi nodded solemnly and disappeared with Toshinori, leaving the roof a vacant place. With Izuku. The three were walking down the dark hallway back towards Izuku's dorm, all looking forward to putting this day behind them and continuing their school life. They arrived at Izuku's door, which he quietly opened after peeking in to ensure Eri was still asleep. Once in the room, Ruby quietly jumped down from Izuku's back and walked toward the bed, seeing Eri asleep and cuddling Izuku's pillow. Oh my, she is just adorable beyond belief, Ruby said quietly while barely controlling her excitement from seeing such cuteness up close. It is very adorable, Lily said, stepping beside Ruby and looking down at the sleeping girl, smiling. You're not wrong about that, but let's head to bed, Izuku said, pulling the covers back and getting under them. In her sleep, Eri crawled onto Izuku's chest, cuddled into it, and then settled back into sleep. That was the most adorable thing I have ever seen in my life, Ruby said, gently crawling under the covers on Izuku's left while Lily did the same on his right. Once they were both settled in, they snuggled into Izuku's sides, using his arms as pillows. Good night, you two, sleep well, Izuku said, pulling the two close to his side, causing them to blush even though he couldn't see it. Good night, Izuku. Sleep well, the two said, cuddling into Izuku's side and falling asleep almost immediately. The sense of security that Izuku brought the two of them put them at ease, and they found themselves drifting off into sleep. Izuku soon followed them, enjoying their presence. Time skip brought to you by Eri making friends with all the Grimm. It was the following morning, and Izuku woke up to pounding on his door. He groaned and tried to turn over but found he couldn't. He opened his eyes and looked down, finding a sleeping Eri on his chest, her tiny fist grabbing his shirt. Izuku looked to his left and right and found Lily and Ruby still asleep, their faces buried into his neck and side in that order. Izuku found himself in a predicament, commanded a shadow to rise and stand by the end of the bed, and used shadow exchange to get out of the bed, canceling the summoning and leaving the three still sleeping. Not feeling Izuku's warmth, Lily and Ruby would scoot closer together, bringing Eri in between them and wrapping an arm around the sleeping girl. Izuku, seeing the situation, found it adorable, brought out his scroll, and took a picture of the three. This cute moment was brought to an end by pounding on his door. Izuku walked over to the door, pulling it open to see a worried Yang and Nora standing in his doorway. Finally, you answered the door. We got a problem, Yang said, looking worried. What could be such a big problem that you come banging on my door at? Izuku says, holding back a yawn and looking at his scroll. 5 in the morning. That doesn't matter right now, Yang said, grabbing Izuku's shirt and shaking him. Ruby is missing. Same with Lily. She said she would see you last night but never returned, Nora said, taking Yang's place and shaking Izuku awake. Will you two calm down? Izuku said, pulling the two frantic women off him. You don't have to worry about those two. They are safe. Yang. Where are they then? Izuku. They are currently asleep in my room. Yang. Nora. What? Why? Shish, Izuku hissed, silencing the two. Quiet, they are still sleeping along with Eri. Yang. Nora. Sorry. Sigh, it's fine. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. As for why they found me on the roof last night, and after talking for a bit, they asked if they could sleep in my room, and I saw no reason to say no, so I agreed. The two let out a sigh of relief, finding out that their teammates were safe. But they were slightly jealous that the two got to sleep in Izuku's room, and one of them was going to make their thoughts known. Yang. That's not fair. How come Ruby gets to sleep with you? She asked, and I saw no reason to refuse. Plus, I got this adorable picture out of it, Izuku said, showing the two the picture he had taken of the three, which the two agreed was adorable. Nora. So you're saying if we wanted to sleep in your room, all we had to do was ask? Izuku. Sure, as long as I don't see a reason to say no, but if that's all, I am going back to sleep until I need to wake up again, so if there is nothing else, I will see you both later. Fine, but I am sleeping in your room tonight. No exceptions, Yang said, poking Izuku's chest while having a blush. Nora. Me too, sure, not like you would listen even if I said no, Yang, and it wouldn't be the first time you snuck into my bed. Now see you both later, Izuku said, turning around and walking back into his room, leaving a blushing Yang and Nora, who was staring at her with a hint of jealousy, knowing that she got to sleep with Izuku before. Well, let's go back to our rooms, Yang said quickly, turning around and walking away, leaving Nora alone, staring after the retreating Yang. I wonder why she was so eager, but who cares? Let's go back to bed, Nora said, shrugging and walking toward her room. Izuku awakens on the other bed in the room after Yang had woken him earlier. He walked back into the room and decided to go to the additional bed, seeing no way to return to his old spot. Izuku tried to get up but felt a weight on his chest holding him down. He looked down and was met by the sight of jet black hair with a pink strip running through it. Izuku was confused because he had left Lily over with Ruby and Eri when he got up to answer the door. He looked to where Ruby was to find her still cuddling Eri, both fast asleep. He felt movement, looked down, and was met with pink eyes staring at him. Good morning, Lily. How did you sleep? Also, how did you end up over here? Izuku said, giving her a warm smile and causing her to blush lightly. Good morning to you as well, Zuku, Lily returned the smile. I slept well, more so than usual. As for how I ended up here, I woke up and saw you were gone. So I got up and noticed you were over here, so I joined you. The question is, how did you end up over here? Izuku. Well, Nora and Yang were banging on my door, worried because you and Ruby were nowhere to be seen. Don't know how you three didn't wake up from it. Lily. That makes sense. Nora might be scatterbrained, but she is a good friend. I can tell, and as much as I enjoy this, would you mind getting up? Izuku asked, causing Lily's slight blush to develop into a much deeper one as she quickly got up. Lily. Sorry, I should have noticed. It's okay, Lily. I don't mind at all. It was pretty comfortable actually, Izuku said, standing up and stretching, giving Lily a glance at his scarred torso underneath his shirt. While she did enjoy the view, the story behind them slightly diminished her blush. Lily walked over and gently touched the scars, running her fingers over them. Izuku jumped at the sudden touch and looked down, seeing Lily with her hand under his shirt and her hands rubbing his stomach, tracing the scars there, a sad look on her face. Izuku. The story behind those might be sad, but I like to look at them in a different light. Lily. What would that be? Izuku. I survived. No matter what, they broke me, pushed me to do something stupid, but sometimes you only need someone to reach out a hand to help you. Ultimately, they are a work of art all on their own. Lily. Do you ever wish you could forget it all? Izuku. Sometimes, yes, it's hard to forget something when it's carved into your skin, but at the same time, I wonder what type of person I would be if I did forget it all. Lily. I think you would be the same person you are now. A kind and caring father to a lovely little girl and someone who will stand up for others without a second thought, even if everyone hates you for it. For the record, I don't think you're a demon, just someone afraid of losing what he holds close and will do anything to ensure they are safe. Izuku looked at Lily with a soft, warm smile which she returned, looking up into his emerald green eyes. The moment was ruined by someone talking, causing the two to jump back from each other in surprise and blush. How long are you gonna stand there with your hand up his shirt, Lily? The two looked over to see Ruby sitting up and looking at them with a pout across her face. Ruby stood up from the bed, walked over to Izuku, and hugged him tight, burying her face in his chest. And I agree, you are not a demon, Izu, and anyone who says otherwise will have to answer to me, including you. Izuku chuckled at Ruby's statement and hugged her back, but noticed Lily pouting, so he opened an arm, inviting her into the hug, which she eagerly accepted. Thank you too for everything you said. What did I do to deserve all of you in my life? Izuku said with a smile and a few tears, pulling the two closer. Ruby. What else be you? That sounded corny as heck, Ruby, Izuku said, lightly chuckling. Ruby pulled back and started punching his chest lightly. Don't ruin the moment, Izu. Izuku laughed at Ruby's onslaught of punches, putting up a weak defense from them as Lily watched the two laughing at the antics between them. What's going on? Eri said, sitting up and yawning, rubbing her eyes, her bedhead in full effect. Nothing, sweetie, your big sis Ruby is just bullying your papa, Izuku said, smirking at Ruby, who gave him a fake hurt look and continued her assault on his shoulder. Big sis Ruby, be nice to papa, Eri said, getting out of the bed slowly and sleepily, walking over to Izuku and hugging his leg, trying to defend him. Izuku just smiled down at the small girl's attempt to protect him. He picked her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, laying her head on his shoulder. Thank you for protecting me, Snowball, Izuku said, kissing the top of her head and earning a sleepy smile from the girl. Meanwhile, Ruby was pouting while Lily was taking pictures of the two. And you better send me those pictures, Lily. She gave him a thumbs up and started pulling Ruby out of the room. Lily. Come on, Ruby, let's head back to our rooms. Our teams showed up looking for us earlier and are probably worried, plus we need to get ready for classes. Bye, Ku. We'll see you later during classes. Bye, Izu. See you during classes. Ruby yelled as the door closed, waving bye to the father and daughter, who returned the wave with a smile. Well, Snowball, let's get you changed, then we'll get some breakfast, Izuku said, looking at Eri, who was nodding off in his arms. Will you be making it? Eri asked, looking up and giving sleepy puppy dog eyes. If you want me to, Izuku said, not being able to resist the cuteness. Yay, Eri said, waking up instantly and raising her arms in joy. All Izuku could do was laugh as he put his daughter on the bed and started getting her outfit ready for the day. You are a good father, Izuku. Izuku looked back to where he heard the voice coming from to see Nana sitting beside Eri on the bed, smiling at the small girl sitting excitedly for the food her father would make. Yeah, well, I had an excellent example of what not to do, Izuku said, turning back around and finishing getting the outfit ready. Very accurate and an even better example of what a father should be like, Nana said, floating over beside Izuku and seeing the outfit he was picking out for Eri. I think the red will go better with the shoes. Izuku. Yeah, my dad was amazing. He helped me when no one else would. I only wish Eri could have met him. He would have spoiled her rotten, and she would have him wrapped around her little finger. Also, no black and purple are perfect for this outfit. Izuku stood up with Eri's outfit in his arms and walked over to the bed, setting them beside her. Then he turned around to get clothes for himself, wanting to keep the same color scheme that Eri had with her dress and shoes. Eri. Papa, who are you talking to? Izuku. Oh, no one important, just a crazy lady who lives in your papa's head along with a few others. Eri. Are they nice? Izuku. So far, yes, although I could do without two of them, but there is nothing I can do about them at this moment, so hopefully, they stay quiet and away from us. Eri. Are they the mean people you told me about? Izuku. Yes, they are. Eri. Then I don't want to meet them. They were mean to Papa. It's okay, sweetie. You will never have to meet them. Izuku said, finishing getting his clothes together, walking back over to where Eri was, and letting her head. Now, get changed so we can go eat. Okay, Papa, Eri said, jumping off the bed and grabbing her clothes, then walking over to get changed in the bathroom, leaving Izuku alone with Nana to change. Do you mind? Izuku said, looking over at Nana, who was floating around the room, acting like she was not watching Izuku waiting for him to change. I don't mind at all, Nana said, looking at Izuku and smirking while looking down and waiting. Izuku just sighed, turned around, and started removing his clothes to change. The whole time he ignored the whistles coming from Nana. Soon he was done and was changed into a nice black and purple suit, and Eri soon exited the restroom. Eri walked over to Izuku and let him fix her hair. Once he was done, he picked up Eri and left their room, making his way toward the dining hall. Once they arrived at the hall, Izuku was about to walk toward the kitchen, but he heard the sound of approaching feet behind him. Before he could turn around to see who it was, he was interrupted by someone jumping on his back, hugging his neck, and wrapping their legs around his waist. Izu, Ruby said, hugging his neck tighter. Gah, Ruby, what have I said about jumping on my back while I am carrying Eri? Izuku said, looking at the smiling girl. Not to, Ruby said, a bead of sweat rolling down her head while still keeping the smile on her face. Izuku. And what did you do? Ruby. Jumped on your back while you were carrying Eri. Izuku. Exactly, and here I was going to make breakfast for you, but now, as punishment, no breakfast for you. Ruby's face fell upon hearing this. The smile quickly faded upon hearing that she would not be getting to eat Izuku's food. No, you can't do that, Izu. I'm sorry, please feed me, Ruby cried out, hugging Izuku's neck tighter, almost cutting off his air, which shocked him slightly with her strength. Does that include us as well? Izuku turned around and saw the rest of Team RWBY and JNPR standing there watching the three. Izuku. Good morning, you guys, and no, it doesn't include you all, just Ruby. No, Izu, please, I am sorry. Eri, please help your big sis out, Ruby said, looking towards the tiny girl with pleading eyes. Don't bring Eri into this, Ruby, Izuku said, looking away from the group before him and back at Ruby until he felt a tug on his shoulder. He looked over and saw Eri looking up at him. Papa, please forgive big sis Ruby, Eri said, getting down and looking up at Izuku and giving her best puppy dog eyes, and was soon joined by Ruby doing the same. Izuku tried to resist at first and stand by what he said, but the onslaught of cuteness from the two wore down his resistance, and he slumped his shoulders. Okay, I'll make her something, Izuku said, unable to overcome the cuteness of the two. Yay, Ruby said, jumping around in happiness with Eri. It'll be okay, Greenie. You're not the first to fall to Ruby's puppy dog eyes, and it didn't help that the Snowy joined in on it, Yang said, walking over and patting Izuku on the back while watching her sister jump for joy with Eri. Yeah, I believe it, but at least they're happy, Izuku said, smiling at the end while watching the two. Ruby ran over and jumped, hugging Izuku's neck. Thank you, Izu, Ruby said, kissing Izuku's cheek, causing him to blush slightly at the open affection. She quickly let go and ran back over to Eri, pickling her up and making her way to an available table, waiting eagerly for her food with Eri on her lap. Well, she is excited, Izuku said, laughing slightly and looking at Yang and the rest, only to be met with pouting faces. I better get started. He quickly turned around and walked toward the kitchen, leaving the group to walk toward Ruby and Eri. 30 minutes later, Izuku came walking out of the kitchen with a tray of food in each hand. He walked toward the table where the group was sitting and started handing out food to each of them. They all started digging in as soon as he finished putting the food down. Papa, aren't you going to eat? Eri said. The others at the table looked up to see Izuku still standing with a food tray in his hand. Izuku. Not this time, Snowball. Why's that Zuku? Nora said with a mouth full of pancakes. Izuku. Nora, please don't talk with your mouth full. The reason why I am going to check on the other person involved in yesterday's incident and figured I would bring them breakfast and check on how they were doing, seeing as they were in a worse state than Jane. Pyrrha. That's nice of you, Izuku. Let us know if we can do anything to help. Izuku. I will, Pyrrha. Also, could I ask one of you to watch Eri? I don't want her coming with me. Jane. Why don't you want to bring her with you? Izuku. She has trouble with hospitals or anything like them. Ah, I see. Well, in that case, I will, Jane started to say but was cut off by Nora, who jumped out of her seat, grabbing Eri from Ruby's lap and pulling her into a hug. I'll watch her, Nora excitedly said. The sudden shout and movement startled Eri, but she quickly calmed down and returned the hug Nora was giving her. Izuku. That's fine, just make sure to keep an eye on her. She likes to disappear when not watched for even a second. Papa, Eri said, looking at her father with a pout that everyone thought was cute. Sorry, Snowball, but you know it is the truth. Need I remind you of when we were getting groceries, and I looked away to check the price of something? You somehow ended up 3 aisles away, Izuku said, walking over and petting Eri's head, causing her pout to deepen but still nuzzle into Izuku's hand. Also, there will be no classes today after yesterday's incident. Yang. How do you know that, Greenie? Izuku. Olivia sent me a message while I was preparing food. Well, wasn't that nice of her? Yang said, a tick mark appearing above her head along with the rest of the group, hearing how close Izuku was with the headmaster. Yes, but I better get going before the food gets cold, Izuku said, feeling the mood around the table shift. He quickly left, leaving the group. Once Izuku was gone, the two groups sighed and silently returned to eating what Izuku had prepared. They were all deeply thinking about the events that had just transpired. They were all silently sitting until they heard a small sigh and looked over to see that it had come from Eri, who was looking down sadly. What's wrong, Eri? Pyrrha asked the small girl who looked up at her. Nothing's wrong, Eri said, looking back down at her food. Well, now we know you are definitely Izuku's daughter, Lily said, petting Eri's head. But we can tell something is bothering you. You can tell us anything. Eri. I sometimes wish Papa was more selfish. Ruby. What do you mean, Snowball? Eri. Papa will never do something if it means hurting someone else, especially if he cares for that person. He would rather deny his happiness if it meant sparing someone's feelings. Nora. That sounds like Zuzu, but what brought this on, Snowflake? Eri. Papa cares for all of you, and I know you all care for him just as much, and there are even more that I see care for Papa just as much as you all. But I am worried that Papa will never admit any of this because he doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and he probably feels like he is playing with all of your feelings, which hurts him even more. Yang. Snowy, it'll be okay, and none of us think he is playing with our emotions. We understand that he has been hurt many times, and it will take longer for us to get close to him. Ruby and I have known him the longest, and we still don't know many of his secrets. So don't worry too much, okay? Eri nodded, accepting this momentarily, but she still worried for her father. She did not want him to spend his life alone, and she wanted a mama that would make her father happy. Back with Izuku. When Izuku left the cafeteria, he stored the food in his inventory to stay warm while going to the infirmary. As he started walking that way, Izuku rounded a corner and ran directly into Betty Oobleck and Peter Port, almost knocking the former over. But due to his fast reflexes managed to catch her by the waist and keep her from falling. Izuku. Sorry about that, Ms. Oobleck. It's quite all right, Mr. Sung, Betty said, adjusting her glasses to hide her blush. Izuku pulled her back up to help her stand, then looked back at his two colleagues. Where are you off to in such a hurry, Mr. Sung? Port asked while stroking his mustache. Izuku. I am off to the infirmary to check on the other girl involved in yesterday's incident. Port. Ah, I see, such a dreadful thing for someone so young to experience. Hopefully, she will be able to overcome it and not allow it to drag her down into despair. Izuku. I agree, and it's our job as teachers to ensure that outcome happens. I could not have said it better myself, my boy, Port said with a hearty chuckle while Betty was smiling while adjusting her glasses. Now, if you don't mind, I better be on my way, Izuku said, stepping by the two and rounding the corner. As soon as he was around the corner, he popped his head back around and looked at the two. "Before I forget, I made coffee and left it in the CAF." Before Izuku could finish his sentence, the two bolted toward the cafeteria, leaving Izuku laughing. After that, Izuku quickly made his way toward the infirmary. He stopped by the nurse's station and asked where the girl from yesterday's incident was. The nurse informed Izuku that she was in the first room on the right. Izuku thanked her and made his way toward the room. As Izuku approached the door, he heard a scream from within the room. He quickly pulled out one of his daggers and rushed toward the door without a second thought. He threw open the door, ready to fight, only to be met with the sight of three women surrounding one on a bed. As he burst in through the door, the four looked up at him in shock and one with fear until they saw who it was. "Is everything okay?" Izuku asked, looking around the room and making sure everything was okay. "Yes, everything is fine. She just woke up from a nightmare, is all. But why are you here, Mr. Sung?" the lady sitting next to the one on the bed asked. Izuku sighed and put the dagger back into his inventory. The four's eyes widened, seeing the dagger disappear into thin air. "Well, Ms. Otto, I came to check on Ms. Scarlatina and the rest of your team," Izuku said, looking between the two and then toward the other teammates. The first was Coco Otto. If Izuku had to describe her in one word, it would be fashionista. Even in the infirmary, she wore top-notch clothes in the early morning. She was watching Izuku with a calm, calculating stare and watching his every move, making sure he was not about to do something to her teammates. While on the complete opposite side was her teammate Velvet Scarlatina. She was a rabbit faunus with long brown hair in a tangled mess. Seeing as she just woke up, she was currently wearing nurse scrubs. When Izuku's eyes moved toward her, she seemed to shrink down and try and cover her ears as if to hide them. Izuku gave her his best and warmest smile to calm her down. It seemed to work as her body relaxed, and she let go of her ears. Izuku looked away from her and toward the next occupant standing next to the door. Izuku had just burst through. Her name was Yatsushi Adaichi. But from what Izuku knew, she preferred to be called Yatsa. She was taller than Izuku, standing at about 6 feet 8 inches if he had to guess, and had the frame of a professional bodybuilder but somehow still managed to stay slim. Izuku looked away from Yatsa and towards the last occupant of the room. Her name was Foxy Alistair. She was sitting in the corner of the room, head cocked to the side and eyes closed. She had mocha skin and long red hair that was put into a ponytail. Izuku could see tiny scars running up and down her arms and across her stomach. Izuku said, rubbing his chin. "What is it?" Coco asked, still keeping her eyes on Izuku. "Izuku, you're blind, are you not, Ms. Alistair?" "What gave it away?" Foxy asked, opening her eyes and exposing the milky white eyes. "Well, the fact that you kept your ears always pointing in my direction was one way," Izuku said, walking over to stand in front of her. "Do you mind if I take a look?" "I don't see why not," she joked, and Izuku chuckled. Izuku crouched in front of her and cupped her face, looking closely at her eyes. "Have you always been blind, Ms. Alistair?" "Foxy. As far as I can remember, yes. What's the point of asking all these questions? Are you just trying to pity me?" "Not at all. I find the fact that you have made it this far in life simply amazing," Izuku said, standing up and taking a step back. "The reason for all these questions is I was wondering if you want to see." All four's eyes widened at this question, with Coco standing up and marching over to Izuku, grabbing his shirt, pulling him down, and looking into his eyes. She spoke with clenched teeth and an intense stare that would have scared anyone else. "Coco, if you think this is funny, I'll kick your ass right now. What you're saying is impossible, and if you're trying to be funny, you can leave." "But I am being serious," Izuku said, gently pulling her hand from his shirt and straightening it. "How about we eat some breakfast while I explain everything?" As soon as the words left his mouth, there were 4 consecutive stomach growls, all of which looked embarrassed. "I'll take that as a yes." Izuku reached a hand out and pulled out the tray of food from earlier from his inventory. The smell of the food quickly filled the room, causing the 4's stomachs to rumble again, but 3 were too surprised to be embarrassed. "Velvet, how did you do that?" "Magic," Izuku said while handing out the food to the 4, then took a plate for himself. They sat in silence for a moment, eating and enjoying the food. So what do you mean you're serious about helping her see? Coco asked, breaking the silence. Well, before we get into that, let me first tell you that there is news about Cardin Winchester, Izuku said. When Velvet heard that name, her breathing started to pick up, and her eyes started darting around the room. She was on the verge of a panic attack but quickly calmed down when she felt a hand on her head gently rubbing it. She looked over to see Izuku leaning in and giving her a calming and warm smile. Velvet felt herself relax and accept the touch, enjoying the calm it brought. Izuku, you don't have to worry. He can't hurt you anymore. Coco, you better have a good reason for bringing up that piece of shit around me. If I ever get my hands on him, he's dead. Izuku, well, about that, you're a little too late. Yatsa, what do you mean? Cardin Winchester is dead. Izuku explained the story he had told the investigators yesterday to the four while keeping a hand on Velvet's head, hoping to keep her calm. Coco, well then, good riddance. This world doesn't need people like that asshole. My only wish is I could have seen it happen. Foxy, I agree. Yatsa nodded her head in agreement. Coco, now that that is out of the way, back to the main subject. How would you give Foxy her sight? Well, that requires another story, Izuku said while collecting the plates from the four and putting them back into his inventory. A while back, when the year was starting, and I got put on leave after my altercation with the asshole. I met someone on one of my trips to explore the town. I met someone unable to talk through my time off. We would hang out and eventually grew close. Coco, what does any of this have to do with making her see? Patience, Izuku said, now where was I? Ah, yes, well, I wanted to do something nice for them. When my father passed, he left me with a few things, including a powerful potion that could cure any illness. Now I had no clue if it would affect her muteness, so I modified it, but in doing so, the singular potion split into 5 parts: eyes, speech, touch, smell, and, finally, hearing. So I gave her the speech one, but I haven't been able to see her again to find out if it worked or not. Coco, so you expect us to believe this special potion will heal her? Izuku, believe it or not, that is up to you. I simply wish to give you the opportunity. I mean, in the end, what does it cost you? But in the end, the choice is yours. Foxy, can I think about it? Izuku, of course, take as much time as you need. Now on to the other reason I am here. How are you feeling, Ms. Scarlatina? And please be honest. Izuku's gaze went toward the rabbit-eared woman. Unlike before, she didn't shy away, but her ears drooped slightly. Velvet, I think I'm going to drop out of Beacon. Vel, we talked about this. You don't have to drop out, especially now that the bastard is dead. Coco said, getting up and sitting next to her friend and putting a hand on her shoulder. I understand, Coco, but I just feel so weak and that I am just dragging down the team, Velvet said, tears coming to her eyes. I must disagree with you leaving, Izuku said. All eyes turned to him. Velvet, what do you mean? Izuku, well, there is no shame in being weak. Believe it or not, I was probably the weakest person you ever met before my father found and trained me. Having said that, I don't see a problem with being weak. My problem lies with someone who wants to be strong but doesn't do anything to get there. Velvet, then why do you disagree with me leaving? Izuku, Velvet Scarlatina, do you genuinely wish to give up being a huntress? And once again, I ask that you answer honestly. Velvet looked down, not saying anything. Vel, Coco started to say but was quickly silenced by Izuku placing a hand on her shoulder, holding a finger to his lips, and shaking his head, letting Coco know it was her decision. I still want to be a huntress, but, Velvet started to say but was cut off. Then that is all that matters. If you're weak, then train and get strong. Izuku said, walking over and crouching in front of her, laying his hands on her shoulders, causing her to look at him. And to help you with that, if you're willing, I'll train you myself. This statement shocked the 4 women, seeing how far he would go to make her feel better. Velvet, why would you go so far for someone you don't even know that well? Well, I am a teacher. It's my job to make sure you reach your full potential, Izuku said, smiling at her, Plus, I also just like helping people because I know how it feels when you have a dream that seems unreachable to you. Sometimes all it takes is someone to reach out a helping hand. Velvet was overwhelmed and broke down crying and pulled Izuku into a tight hug, crying her eyes out, just saying thank you repeatedly. The others in the room smiled at the scene, silently thanking the green-haired man for helping out their teammate. Not long after, Velvet fell asleep, and Izuku gently laid her down and covered her with a blanket which she snuggled into, and Izuku thought it was adorable. "Thank you, Mr. Sung, for helping and keeping her here. Our team would not feel the same without her," Coco said, which the other two nodded in agreement. "No need to thank me. As I said, I enjoy helping people. Now to talk about the rest of you," Izuku said, standing up and turning toward the rest of the team. "Yatsa. What do you mean, sir?" "Izuku. You three will be joining the training." "Foxy. Do you really think that's necessary, sir?" "Yes, I do for one, Yatsa," Izuku said, looking at the giant woman. "You rely too much on brute strength to overcome your enemy, while in most cases that will work, you must prepare for the times it doesn't. Also, your defensive skills are amazing, so I mainly want you working on your swordsmanship while refining your defense." "What would you suggest then, sir?" Yatsa asked, looking intrigued. "Izuku. You will be training with two different people, which I believe you have already met." Yatsa. "Who is that, sir?" "Iron, Igras, come out." As Izuku said the names, two shadows rose behind him, shocking Yatsa and Coco. "Meet your sword teacher Igras and your defensive teacher Iron." Both shadows nodded in greeting. Coco. "What the hell? Where did those two come from?" Izuku. "Long story, maybe once we all get to know each other better, I will tell it to you. Now on to the next one, Ms. Ailstare. While you are mainly a frontlines fighter, I suggest increasing your stealth skills. It would go nicely with your semblance and allow for a more excellent range of dealing with your enemies, both grim and non-grim." Foxy sat thinking for a moment, thinking about what Izuku had just said. She finally looked up toward where he was talking and asked, "Who will be my teacher?" "Izuku. That will be both Igras and me." She nodded and was excited to learn what she could if it would help out her team more. Now for the last one, Ms. Otto. Coco. "Yes, teach." Izuku. "Since you are a back lines fighter and the leader of your team, we will be doing something different." Coco. "What's that?" Izuku. "You and I will be holding mock battles where we command our teams. These mock battles will teach you how to strategize with a team you're unfamiliar with and properly manage your team while giving them enough room to think and adapt for themselves." Coco thought for a moment. She had always thought she was doing a good job leading her team, but was willing to admit that she was not the best. So if she could learn anything from this, she would do it to better protect her team. Coco looked toward Izuku and nodded her agreement, earning a smile from the green-haired man. "Good, now I better get going. Meet me in Ms. Goodwich's class after classes end." The three nodded in understanding. Izuku stood up, dusted off the back of his pants, and was about to say something else, but before he could, the door to the room burst open, causing the four to jump in surprise and Velvet to wake up with a start. Standing at the door were Ruby and Nora. Both were out of breath, having seemed to have been running for a while. When they saw Izuku, both rushed toward him and began talking so fast that he could not understand them. Girls, calm down and take a breath. I can't understand you when you're talking so fast," Izuku said, motioning for them to calm down so they could explain what was happening. Both took a deep breath and simultaneously said something that sent a cold chill shooting down Izuku's spine. "Ruby, Nora. We can't find Eri." Izuku stood before the two women, rubbing the bridge of his nose in annoyance while they looked at him nervously, not liking the silence. The others in the room looked between Izuku and the two women, wondering what would happen and how they could help. Izuku. "So let me get this straight, even after I told you not to take your eyes off her, you did precisely that, and when you looked back, she was gone without a trace." Ruby. "Yes, sir." Izuku. "After that, you and your teams, who are still out there looking for her, couldn't find her anywhere in the school." Nora. "Yes, sir. You then decided to get the teachers involved, and they are now running around trying to find her as well. While they sent you two to find and inform me of what was going on. Do I understand this correctly?" Izuku said, letting go of his nose and glaring at the two, who shrank at the look. Ruby, Nora. Yes, sir. Izuku sighed and rubbed his temples, already feeling the headache coming. Izuku. Now I know what that damn zombie-looking bastard felt like, but there is good news. How can there be good news when your daughter is missing? And who are you talking about? Velvet asked, looking shocked at what Izuku said along with the others in the room. Izuku. There's good news because I know Eri is safe. And I am talking about an old friend I made back home who was a teacher. Koko. How do you know that? Izuku. Because there is not a massive angry bear rampaging through campus killing whatever put her in danger. Yatsa. I'm sorry, a what? I believe he is talking about Tank. He is very protective of Eri, to the point he only ever leaves her side now when Izuku orders him. Which he never does, especially after what happened back home. Igris said, speaking up for the first time. Velvet. What happened? Long story. I will explain it at a later date. But before that, let's find Eri. It should be relatively easy since Tank is with her. I can look through his eyes to find out where she is. Izuku said, closing his eyes and focusing on Tank. Nora. Wait, you can look through your shadow's eyes. Izuku. Yes, I just have to focus. Ruby. Have you ever seen anything you shouldn't have by accident doing that? Izuku thought back to when he had looked through his shadow's eyes and had seen Summer, Ruby, and Yang naked. His face darkened slightly, remembering that, and he shook his head to get the images out. Please let me focus so I can find Eri, Izuku said, avoiding the question, which didn't go unnoticed by the gathered group and the blush. They wondered what he had seen but dropped the subject for now. Izuku brought his focus back on Tank, looking through his eyes. As what the shadow saw came into view, Izuku was left speechless at what he was seeing. He opened his eyes to see the expectant faces of Nora and Ruby and the curious ones of Team CFVY. Well, what's going on? Nora asked impatiently, not liking the confusion on Izuku's face. Izuku. Well, I know for sure she is safe. Ruby. Well, that's good, but what's with the look on your face? That is because I don't know if I should be impressed or terrified, Izuku said, walking out the door and leaving the room deathly silent, with everyone in there wondering what could have terrified someone as strong as Izuku. Ruby and Nora thought they dodged a bullet and sighed in relief, only for it to stop when Izuku popped his head back in the door. Also, as punishment for losing her, you and your teams will be doing sprints around the school until I say stop. Ruby and Nora's faces fell hearing this while Izuku laughed as he walked down the hallway to where his daughter was. But not wanting to be left behind, the six quickly followed behind Izuku, Ruby, and Nora slower than the rest, already dreading their punishment. Let us take a look back in time to before Eri wandered off. Eri's POV. I was sitting with my big sisters, having just finished the breakfast my papa had made me. I was sitting between my big sisters, Lily and Nora, enjoying the company of everyone as they talked to each other and me. While I was sitting there talking, I suddenly craved an apple. Thinking I would be quick and that no one would notice if I quickly went to the kitchen and asked the friendly cooks if they had one. I quickly and quietly got up from my seat and made my way toward the kitchen. Once I reached the kitchen door, I pushed it open and was met with Auntie Betty and Uncle Port standing at the counter drinking from a pot of coffee. They both looked at me when I opened the door to the kitchen and looked at me in confusion. Auntie Betty walked over to me and crouched down. Betty. What are you doing here alone, little one? Eri. I am not alone. I am with my big sisters, but I just wanted an apple and didn't want to disturb them, so I came by myself. I see. Well, let's get you an apple so you can return quickly, so they don't see you're gone and get worried. Auntie said, standing up and holding a hand out to me, which I gladly took and gave her a smile which she returned. We walked over to where Uncle Port stood with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. I was surprised when Auntie Betty picked me up and sat me on the countertop next to the pot of coffee. Stay here while I grab you an apple, Auntie said. I barely had enough time to nod my head before she zoomed off. And there she goes quickly, as always, Uncle Port said from my left. I looked over at him and was greeted with the same warm smile. How are you doing today, little one? I am good, Uncle Port. I said, giving him a smile. His smile widened, and he petted my hair, which I enjoyed but not as much as when my papa did. Port. That's good to hear, little one. Here you are, Eri, Auntie Betty said, holding an apple for me to take, which I did happily and took a big bite of, enjoying it. Thank you, Auntie, I said, giving her a smile that brightened her mood because she returned it with a pet to my hair. Betty. No problem, Snowflake. If you ever need anything, you just ask. Okay. Eri. Okay, Auntie. Betty. Good. Now you better return before the others notice you're gone and start to worry about you. Okay, Auntie, I said with a smile and hopped down from the counter with the apple in my hand. I looked back toward Auntie Betty and Uncle Port. Bye, I can't wait to be in your classes again. Both. Us as well, little one, Snowflake. It's always fun when you join us for class. I giggled and took off, returning to where my big sisters were. Once I arrived back to where I thought they were, I was concerned when I didn't see anyone there. I thought for a second that I had gone to the wrong table, so I looked around for them at other tables but could not find them anywhere in the cafeteria. I gripped the apple in my hand tighter and started to worry. But I had only one thought in my head at that moment. Eri. Papa is going to be so mad. End of POV. When the group noticed that Eri was gone, they immediately started panicking and looked all over the cafeteria for her, but due to their panicked state, they never thought to look in the kitchen. When they could not find her in the cafeteria, they split up and searched all over the campus. While they were searching for Eri was also searching for them. There were a couple of close calls where they almost ran into each other but had just missed the other by a hair. Eventually, they decided to meet to discuss what should be done while talking. Olivia, Glinda, Betty, and Port found the group talking. They explained what had happened to the teachers, with all four immediately growing worried and wondering where the small girl could have disappeared. The teachers decided to join in the search but told Ruby and Nora that they would have to find Izuku and explain the situation to him, which they were not happy about but knew it had to be done. Now we return to the present time with Izuku and the others walking out of the school. They were heading towards the forest at the edge of the campus. Ruby. Izu, where are we going? We are going to the forest over there, Izuku said, pointing towards the forest on his left. She is currently playing in there. What? Ruby and the others yelled. Velvet. Doesn't she know how dangerous the forest is? It's infested with Grim. Coco. And why are you so calm about it? Izuku. Well, for one, as I said before, I know she is safe because Tank is with her, and the reason she is playing out there even though it's dangerous is probably because of me. Foxy. What do you mean? Izuku. Well, she has faith that I will always come to protect her no matter what. So that has made her bolder with her actions than she otherwise would. Even though she is still quite shy when meeting new people. Yatsa. That is both adorable and quite concerning. Probably, but she is not wrong. IWOU. As Izuku was talking, he suddenly stopped, causing Ruby to walk into his back. Ruby. Ah, Izu, why did you stop? Shish. Izuku shushed Ruby and looked around. They had just walked into the forest when Izuku stopped and started looking around. All six were tense, seeing how closely Izuku was watching his surroundings. It stayed like that for several seconds before Izuku quickly picked up Ruby and moved back just as a bullet hit the ground where he had stood moments ago. The other five quickly got into a defensive stance. Well, I was wondering who would be the first to try and attack me, Izuku said, still holding onto Ruby while looking around. Izu, do you mind putting me down, please? Ruby asked. Izuku looked down and saw a bright red ruby staring at her chest. Izuku looked down and saw that he had accidentally grabbed a hold of her breast in his hurry to dodge. His face immediately went red in embarrassment, and he quickly but gently put Ruby down. Once her feet touched the ground, she stepped back, still embarrassed, and looked at her feet, only sparing a glance up at Izuku's face, which was still red, causing her to have a soft smile. While Nora looked at the two with jealousy, and the others looked on indifferently, knowing it was an accident. Ahem, what do you mean to attack you first, Zuku? Nora asked, clearing her throat to gain the two's attention. Ahem, well, Nora, what I mean is when I told the class that the first one to land a hit on me will get one request from me for a day, Izuku said, clearing his throat and looking at the orange-haired woman. And it seems this will be the first group to take their chance. Nora. Oh, I forgot about that, but shouldn't you call it off since we are busy? Not really, since it seemed to be a spur-of-the-moment thing they're doing. Izuku said, but this will be perfect as an example. Coco. What do you mean? Miss Scarlatina, Izuku said, his voice sharp and clear in the silence, causing not just her but all six to stand at attention and look toward Izuku. I want you to watch closely what I am about to do because this is what I will teach you during our training. Do I make myself clear? Izuku asked, looking at the rabbit faunus who stood at attention. Velvet. Yes, sir. Good, Izuku said, then pulled out a wooden sword, and as soon as it was in his hand, he turned around, smiled at the group, and seemed to flicker and disappeared. As they watched where Izuku just stood, they quickly saw people appearing where he was standing one by one until 4 people were sitting on the ground, either tied up or knocked out, with Izuku standing right behind them. The 5 looked at Izuku with stars in their eyes, shocked at what he just did. Izuku. Well, were you paying attention? Velvet. Yes, sir. But what exactly was that you just disappeared, and then they appeared not long after? Ruby. Was it that stealth thingy you used during orientation? No, that was something different. What I just used was a technique that I made that uses the strength of a person's legs to propel them forward rapidly. Izuku said, putting the sword away and crouching to untie the group and wake the unconscious students. Which causes them to flicker away and move at extreme speed. It is unsuitable for prolonged fights because of the high stamina drain, but it is devastating in short battles. As Izuku stood up, he stepped back and looked down at the students who had just tried to ambush him. All 4 of them had their heads down in shame. Izuku. Why do you all look so downcast? Student 1. Because we failed. Izuku. Let me ask you a question. Was this planned or an attack of opportunity? Student 1. An attack of opportunity. So there was no planning beforehand, and you almost got me, Izuku asked while in his mind he was thinking. Not really. But I can't break their spirits too much because it might have worked out if it was anyone else. Ah, isn't that sweet of you, Izuku? Nana said, distracting him. And here I thought you only cared about family or those you love. Banjo said, crying fake tears while being patted on the back by Hikage. Izuku. Be quiet, all of you. Student 1. Sir. Izuku. Ah, sorry, I had something on my mind. Where were we again? Student 2. We were saying that was correct. Izuku. Ah, thank you. Well then, there you have it. All I can say to you 4 is if you are going for a more stealthy approach when fighting, you need to research your target and discover their strengths and weaknesses. Also, I would suggest learning about camouflage. Once I knew you were there, I could quickly find your positions. This will work if you can one-shot an opponent, but if not, they will quickly move into close combat like I did or open fire right back. All 10 students stood there with mouths agape and the vestiges looking at Izuku in shock and awe. Izu, that was amazing. Ruby and Nora said, rushing over to stand before Izuku and bouncing excitedly. Student 3. Motherfucker. I never even thought about learning more about camouflage. Hearing the words motherfucker, Izuku burst out laughing, remembering something from his old world. Everyone looked at Izuku, confused, until he eventually calmed down. Izuku. Sorry about laughing. Something you said reminded me of something funny from my past. If you will excuse me, I must be on my way. Without saying another word, Izuku walked around the group and continued to where Eri was. Leaving the group looking at each other confused until the ones who attacked him started talking and leaving the 6 others to run after Izuku. Mr. Sung. What was with your laughter back there? Yatsa asked when they caught up to Izuku, who still had a mischievous smile. Izuku. Well, about that, back where I am from, I was heavily bullied for being different from others. One of my main bullies always cussed every chance he got. Velvet. You were bullied, but you're so strong. Why did you let them? Izuku. Back then, I wasn't like I am now. I was weak, but that isn't needed for this story now. As I was saying, this person liked to cuss a lot. One of his favorite things was to call me a motherfucker. Well, I took that personally. He heard 3 gasps behind him, causing Izuku's smile to widen. Coco. You did not. Oh yes, I did, Izuku said, smiling back at Coco. I don't get it. What did you do? Ruby asked. Izuku looked over to see Nora and Velvet looking confused. Oh my god, you 3 are too innocent for this world, Izuku said, looking back at the other 3. You want to explain, or should I? I got this, Coco said, walking over to the 3 and pulling them into a hushed conversation, the 3 women's faces growing increasingly red as they continued to walk. Coco. And that is it? Why would you do something like that, Izu? Ruby asked, her face red enough to light a night sky along with Nora and Velvet. In my defense, I didn't plan for that outcome. It just happened one day when I was in high school, Izuku said, petting Ruby and Nora's hair to calm them down. How does something like that just happen? Velvet asked, her face still red and growing redder as Izuku reached over and gently petted her hair to calm her, which she enjoyed but saw Ruby pouting because he stopped petting her. While this happened, everyone looked at Izuku, waiting for an explanation, including all the vestiges. Nana. Well, who would have guessed Izuku had this side of him? Now I am curious. Agreed, come on, boy, give us the details. Banjo yelled, earning a glare from Izuku, who stopped petting all 3 hair, seeing as they had calmed down. Izuku. Well, once I moved in with my father, we moved to a different city where I spent a few years going to school, and one day, while I was out and about, we accidentally ran into each other while I was out shopping for food. Nora. Where was Eri? Izuku. This was before I adopted her. Ah, I see, Nora said, her face falling slightly, remembering Eri's life before Izuku, only for Izuku to reach out and pet her head. Izuku. Yay, so when I was getting food, we ran into each other. At first, she was shocked to see me since I looked nothing like before. She demanded to know what had happened to me, so I invited her to get a drink at a local shop and explained everything that had happened to me over the years. Velvet. What happened? Izuku. A lot, but that is a story for another time. After I finished my story, I asked about her life, and she told me that she found her husband cheated on her with another woman. Ruby. That's horrible, Izuku. Agreed, I didn't expect it from him. He seemed like a good person, but I hate cheaters more than anything. So over the next few months, we would meet up and talk and enjoy each other's company, and one day she invited me over to where she was living. And one thing led to another, and we ended up in bed together. Coco. What, you can't end the story like that. You must give some details. Izuku. Nope, that is all you are getting from me on this matter. Besides, we are here. Nora. What? Izuku walked forward and moved some bushes out of the way to show a clearing with a giant black and purple bear lying on the ground while watching a white-haired little girl running around the clearing, laughing while being chased by several Grimm. Izuku and the others watched as his daughter ran around the clearing in the forest, laughing and seeming to enjoy herself as several tiny Grimm chased her. Not far away was Tank lying on the ground while keeping a close eye on Eri. 5 of the 6 women stood there with their mouths agape, staring at what was happening in front of them. Everything they had been told throughout their lives was coming into question, and they were on the verge of an existential crisis. From a young age, they had always been told that Grimm were heartless creatures that would kill anything and everything and existed solely to kill everything. But in front of their very eyes, they saw a small girl running and playing with those same creatures that had tormented everyone on Remnant. The only way they could justify what they saw in their mind was the fact that these Grimm seemed to be young. As they watched, there were several species of Grimm that the group could tell. There were 2 Ursas, a Beowulf, a Nevermore, a Borbotusk, a tiny Death Stalker that was sitting on top of Ares' head, a Taijutsu that was riding on top of one of the Ursas, a Goliath, and finally, something that they had never seen before. It was a tiny dinosaur-like Grimm. The group watched, too shocked to speak, as Eri continued to run around laughing and playing with the Grimm, oblivious to anything else. The silence of the group came to an abrupt end when the voice of Izuku rang out across the clearing. Eri sung, "You are in big trouble." Izuku's voice was sharp and clear, causing Eri to stop abruptly and the Grimm to bump into her. She looked over to see her father, her big sisters, Ruby and Nora, and 4 people she had never met. Papa, Eri said with a slight stutter in her voice, seeing the angry look on her father's face. The Grimm, sensing her distress, looked over at the person causing it and stood in front of Eri as if to protect her. Izuku raised an eyebrow in surprise while the others with him jaws dropped even further, if possible. "Oh well, isn't this interesting?" Izuku said, rubbing his chin slightly and grinning. He stepped forward. As he did, he heard a deep growl from the group of tiny Grimm. Tank lifted his head and was about to release a growl of his own, but Izuku signaled for him to stop, and he put his head back down. "So you wanna play it like that?" Izuku said under his breath, his stare on the Grimm becoming fierce. He released the full force of his bloodlust on the group of Grimm, avoiding his daughter, Tank, and the group behind him. The Grimm visibly stepped back, lowering their heads but remained in front of Eri, still trying to protect her even when scared. "Papa, stop," Eri said, rushing to stand in front of the Grimm. Izuku stopped, and the Grimm visibly relaxed. He then looked towards Eri, who lowered her head under her father's gaze. Izuku hated the look of fear on his daughter's face when looking at him, so he softened his gaze, walked forward, and crouched in front of her. "Eri, tell me how all this happened," Izuku said, his voice gentle but firm. Eri looked up at her father's face expecting to see anger but was met with only a worried look on her father's face. Seeing the worry on her father's face, Eri teared up and lunged forward, hugging Izuku tightly, the Grimm behind her relaxing even more. "I'm sorry, Papa," Eri said, crying into Izuku's chest, who hugged his daughter tightly. "I know you said to stay with big sis Nora and don't wander around, but I wanted an apple and thought I could get one and be back before they noticed I was gone. Why didn't you ask one of us, Eri? We would have been happy to get you one," Nora said, walking up behind Izuku with Ruby. As they approached the Grimm behind, Eri tensed up but settled down at a sharp look from Izuku. "I didn't want to bother any of you," Eri said, sniffing at the end while Izuku wiped her tears away. "Oh, sweetie, you wouldn't have bothered us," Ruby said, pulling Eri away from Izuku and into a hug which Nora joined. Eri sniffed and hugged the two women who were hugging her. Izuku smiled at the sight. "Good, now that is settled," Izuku said, standing up and clapping his hands together, getting everyone's attention. "On to punishments." Punishments?" Ruby asked, a slight trembling in her voice as she continued to hug Eri for support. "Yes, punishments," Izuku said, an evil smile spreading across his face, which the three did not like. "For teams RWBY and JNPR, as I said before, you will be doing laps around the school until I say stop or you collapse." Upon hearing their punishment, Ruby and Nora's faces looked horrified, only for it to grow as Izuku continued. "And on top of that, for 1 month, I will not be preparing any food for your groups," Izuku said, and at this, Ruby and Nora burst into comical tears. "No, you can't do this, Izuku." The two cried out and, after gently putting Eri down, jumped toward Izuku, gripping onto him tightly. "Now that's just evil, Izuku," Nana said, floating around Izuku and the crying woman. "Agreed. If Izuku's food tastes half as good as it looks, then this punishment is evil, but I don't have much pity for them, seeing as I can never have it," Banjo said, pretending to lean on Izuku's shoulder. "I think it is appropriate, seeing as he trusted them to watch his daughter, and they ended up losing her," Yoichi said, with Hikage and En standing behind him, nodding in agreement. "I would have done worse," the second said, with the third agreeing. "Well, I would All Might started to say, only to be cut off by everyone. "Nobody cares or wants to hear your opinion," all the Vestiges said, shooting the blonde-haired skeleton an hate-filled look that shut him up quickly. Izuku started snickering, confusing everyone but Ruby and Eri. "As for your punishment, Eri," Izuku said, straightening his face while trying to ignore the pleading puppy dog eyes Eri was giving him. "No sweets for 2 weeks, and that includes apples." Eri had a look of horror on her face hearing her punishment. The puppy dog eyes she was giving Izuku intensified, hoping she could lower the punishment, but the stern look on her father's face did not waver, and she lowered her head, accepting her punishment. "Good," Izuku said, petting Eri's head, earning a small smile from the girl. "Now the real question is, what should we do with these things?" As Izuku said this, he looked over at the gathered tiny Grimm who were still staring at the group, but as he said that, the small Nevermore flew down and landed on top of his hair. This caused those gathered to start chuckling and Izuku to look annoyed. Just because I am tall and have green hair does not make me a tree. Izuku yelled and tried to shake the Nevermore from his hair, but it stubbornly refused to move. Izuku eventually gave up, and the rest continued to laugh at Izuku's misfortune. Well, tree man, Ruby said, her laughter fading as she wiped the tears from her eyes. I don't think Ms. Ozpin will allow them to stay here. You know them being her mortal enemies and all. That is true, Izuku said, rubbing his chin. The bird still on his head had settled down while the others agreed with Ruby's words. Izuku continued contemplating what to do until he felt a tug on his pants. He looked down and was met with bright ruby red eyes staring up at him hopefully. Papa, please help them, Eri said, her eyes pleading with him. I know they have hurt many people, but these ones are nice and haven't hurt anyone. Little one, our jobs are to hunt them down. Just because they haven't hurt now doesn't mean they won't in the future. Yatsa said, crouching down to kneel in front of Eri and attempting to put a hand on her shoulder, but Eri stepped out of her reach and hid behind her father's leg. No, Eri yelled from behind her father's leg, shocking everyone. They are different from others. They haven't tried to attack me at all, and they even protected me. You all saw that. Hearing Eri protest, everyone but Izuku stood in thought at what they saw when they first arrived in the clearing, how Eri was enjoying herself playing with the Grim, and even how they had tried to protect her when she was scared. It stood in stark contrast to everything they had been told all throughout their lives. Okay, Eri, let's calm down now, Izuku said, reaching down and petting her hair to calm her down, which helped some, but she kept giving Yatsa and her team dirty looks. I agree with Ruby that Olivia will not allow them outside this forest, but I might have another idea. What do you mean, Izu? Ruby asked, tilting her head in confusion. I'll explain everything when the others get here. I don't want to have to explain this more than once, Izuku said, walking over beside Tank, the Grim following him closely. I already had my shadows go and find all of them and bring them here. They should arrive in a bit, so I will take a nap while we wait. Sitting down beside Tank, he leaned back, earning a squawk of indignation from the small bird as it flew up and landed on Izuku's lap. As Izuku sat there, the rest of the Grim walked over and started laying down around Izuku either on his legs or beside him, in the case of the Taijutsu, which wrapped around Izuku's neck with both its heads lying on top of each other. Or the Death Stalker that replaced the Nevermore on top of Izuku's head. The longer I stay with this guy, the more I question everything I was taught. Why do they seem so calm around him? They were even following him. Koko whispered to the group as Izuku got comfortable and soon fell asleep leaning against Tank. Plus, how did he go to sleep so quickly? Ruby. I don't know how Izu falls asleep so fast, but I might know why they are so calm around him. Velvet. Well, do you mind sharing? Well, I think they are scared of him. You saw how they reacted earlier when they stood between him and Eri. Ruby said as the group fell silent, remembering how the Grim reacted earlier to Izuku just staring at them. There might also be another reason why. Foxy. What's that? Because, as far as I can see, your first reason sounds like the right reason. Yatsa. I agree with her, minus the horrible joke. Ruby. Well, I think it might have something to do with what Izu is. Koko. What is he? Sorry, I can't tell you if he hasn't yet. I probably already said too much. Ruby said, looking down slightly. But I think you will learn about it soon since Izu hasn't asked you to leave yet. Don't you agree, Nor? Ruby turned around to look at where Nora was standing a few moments ago, only to be met with empty air. Ruby's head started wiping around, looking around for where Nora had disappeared. Only to come up short as her eyes fell on her asleep curled up next to Izuku with a Beowulf wrapped in her arms while Eri was on Izuku's lap wrapped in his arms, the Nevermore asleep on her lap. When did she get there? Ruby said, puffing up her checks in a slight pout. Before anyone could say anything, she marched over, picking up the Ursa on Izuku's other side and taking its place. She wrapped her arms around it and snuggled into Izuku's side, resting her head on his shoulder. Well, that just happened, Velvet said, a look of confusion on her face at Ruby's actions. Do you think they like him? She whispered to the rest of her group. Coco. If they don't, they are either crazy or swing the other way. Yatsa. Why do you say that? Coco. Think about it. He is strong and a good father, and if their reactions to him saying he won't cook for them are anything to go by, he must be a fantastic cook. Plus, he seems like a very kind person considering he offered to train all of us personally. He also offered Foxy a priceless potion with no strings attached. Speaking of which, are you going to take the offer? Coco asked, turning towards the blind girl in her group. Foxy. I don't know, it just seems too good to be true. Also, if he did have something so unique, why would he waste it on me and not sell it to someone and make a fortune? Yatsa. It is quite weird that he is offering this for free. Coco. While I agree with you girls, I do believe he is a genuinely nice person. We'll just have to wait and see, Foxy said, causing the rest of her team to groan silently and walk away, leaving the red-haired woman snickering at her joke. While this is happening, let us look at what else is happening in the world. Ada's POV. Since returning to the White Fang's hideout, I sat in front of a mirror for the 1000th time. I was still in shock at the sight looking back at me. Even though it had been a while since my Zuzu had healed my face, it still surprised me every time I looked in a mirror. The scar that had plagued my entire childhood and much of my adult life was gone. And the person that had helped me was a human, no less. But a nagging thought in the back of my mind kept bugging me. My Zuzu did not feel like a human at all. I first felt it when I laid eyes on him in the alleyway. Then the feeling grew more potent when we were in the kitchen alone. Zuzu felt like a void that would swallow everything in endless darkness. But the strangest thing was that I didn't feel any type of fear. It almost felt as if I were to fall into the darkness, I would experience a calm rest that no one but my Zuzu could bother me in. Not that I would have minded if he bothered me. A sharp knock on the door brought me out of my thoughts. I quickly put my mask back on in case they decided to barge into my room. Only one person had the backbone to do that, though. What? I yelled, the annoyance in my voice clear. Section Chief Adam. What to see you, Ms. Ada, I heard a female voice say from the other side of the door. Did he say whether it was essential or not? I asked. No, ma'am. All he said is that he wishes to speak to you regarding an upcoming raid. She replied. Very well. Tell him I will arrive in 5 minutes, I reply, sighing. Yes, ma'am, she replied, and I heard her footsteps heading down the hallway. I stood up and got ready to meet my brother. After I was done, I left my room to ensure my mask was securely in place, and I did not want it to fall off. I hadn't told my brother that the scar was gone primarily out of fear of his reaction. I might hate humans, but my brother was on an entirely different level. That did not stop him from using them to his own ends if he thought they would be useful. 5 minutes later, I walked into the meeting room and saw my brother. He stood leaning over a map of the world with several marks where Vale was located and over 24 more worldwide. About time you arrived, he said, standing to his full height, almost a head taller than me. Oh, be quiet, I told you 5 minutes and was here in 5 minutes, so quit complaining. I said, walking up and looking over the map. What did you need me for anyways? I wanted to introduce you to our new partners, Adam said, walking around and standing from me on the other side of the table. New partners? I asked, crossing my arms. Yes, they should arrive any moment. As he said that, I turned around and was instantly on guard and about to reach for my sword. 2 people walked into the room. They were both humans, one I recognized from TV as she had been very prevalent as of late. The other I did not, but she had dual-color hair and was shorter than me but hid it with high heels. "Who are you, and how did you get in here?" I yell, drawing my sword and pointing it at the 2, only for my hand to be grabbed and my sword brought down. Calm down, little sister. These 2 are subordinates to our partner who sent them here to help us destroy Beacon and a few others. Adam said, pushing my hand down even more, to bring the tip of my sword to the floor. What do you mean? Does the High Leader even know about this? I asked, swiping my hand from his grasp. Of course, I asked first, and she approved, Adam said, looking at me until I put the sword back into its sheath and moved to the other side of the table for the 2 humans. Good. Now that that is settled, let's get down to business. Before we begin, there has been a small change in the deal we made, the orange-haired woman said while pulling out a cigar and preparing to light it. Do not light that in here, Roma, my brother said, glaring at Roma, who raised her hand and put the cigar away. And what do you mean there has been a change to our deal? That is not what we agreed on. I told you we couldn't trust them, I snarled, reaching for my sword again. This came down from my boss. Nothing about the deal will change. We just need your assistance getting someone that has piqued my boss's interest quite heavily. Roma said, pulling out a picture, putting it face down on the table, and sliding it over to Adam. His name is Izuku-sung. I felt myself stiffen at the name. It couldn't possibly be my Zuzu, could it? And what could these people possibly want from him? My brother picked up the picture and looked at it. I saw one of his eyebrows raise behind his mask. From where I stood, I could not see the picture clearly. This person doesn't look very special, Adam said, placing the picture back on its face. When he said that, I noticed that the dual-haired woman had a look of anger across her face but was calmed down by a hand on her shoulder from Roma. What could you possibly want this person for? He has something or can make something that has greatly interested our boss, and she wishes to talk to him about it. That is all I am allowed to tell you per her orders. Roma said, crossing her arms over her chest. Very well, we will see what we can do about it, but know that since it was not part of the original deal, it will be a secondary goal at most, Adam said, sliding the picture over my way. I reached out and picked up the picture hesitantly, and my breath caught as soon as I turned it over. The picture was of my darling Zuzu. My thought immediately went to the healing potion that he had given me. Was that what they wanted to get from him? But how had they found out about it? No one else was there when he gave it to her, so how could they have found out? One more question: what about the girl with white hair in the picture? She looks like a faunus. Adam asked, snapping me out of my thoughts, and my eyes moved to the left, and I saw that Zuzu was holding a small white-haired girl with red eyes and a small horn on her head. I remember the bar owner talking about a small girl when I was there. From the information we have gathered on him, it would appear that the girl is his daughter. Her name is Eri-sung, Roma said, and I felt my face pale. My Zuzu already had a daughter. Who was the mother? I'll kill the bitch who stole my Zuzu's heart. He is supposed to love me. I'm supposed to be his first. I wouldn't care if he has other lovers, but I am supposed to be his first and best lover. What should we do with her then, and who is the mother? My brother asked, gaining my undivided attention and waiting for them to answer. For the mother, there isn't one from what we have gathered. She is adopted, so there is no need to worry about that. Roma said, and I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was excited that I would get to be the mother of such an adorable little girl. As for what you should do, I would suggest not doing anything that could put her in danger. Izuku has shown to be extremely violent when someone he cares about is put in danger. Noted. We'll see what we can do, my brother said, nodding his head. Good. We will take our leave then and be in contact when the heist is ready to be pulled off for the shipping containers of dust, Roma said, pulling off her hat and bowing slightly dramatically. She turned to leave the room but was stopped when the dual-colored haired woman pulled on her sleeve, causing her to turn around with a questioning look. Yes, Neo, what is it? Roma asked the shorter woman. Her response was to point back at me. Roma raised an eyebrow questioningly and looked back at me, her eyes searching until they landed on my hand. Oh my bad, Neo, I completely forgot about that. Ms. Taurus, would you kindly hand over that picture? It belongs to Neo here. I felt myself stiffen slightly but made sure not to accidentally crumple the picture in my hand. My mind felt like it was going a mile a minute, wondering what the relationship between these two was and why this picture was so important to this Neo that she would ask for it back. If you don't mind my asking, why would you want this back? It seems like an ordinary picture, I asked, hiding the agitation in my voice. Yes, I am quite curious as well. What is so special about this picture? My brother asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, our dear Izuku there helped little Neo here with something a while back, and ever since, she has been curious about him, and that picture was from when the two met before our boss took an interest in him. So it is quite special to her, so please return it. Roma said, holding out her hand for the picture. I felt myself reluctantly handing it over, and once it was back in Roma's hands, she turned, handing it to Neo and heading for the door. If there is nothing else, we shall take our leave. Have a pleasant rest of your day. As the two left the room, I turned to my brother, who was deep in thought, rubbing his chin as he stared at the map before him. What do we do now, brother? I asked, not likening the situation. For now, we wait and see what happens. For now, I want you to go and learn all you can about this Izuku song. He said, looking at me. But what about the next meeting with the other partner you mentioned? I asked, trying to hide my excitement about being able to learn more about Zuzu. I will deal with it for now. I want you to focus on trying to learn more about this person and trying to capture him, Adam said. Very well then, I will do so, I said, turning and walking towards the door. Just inform me of what happens during the meeting, please. Of course, a leader would not be wise to hide anything from his second-in-command. Now would it? I heard him say as I walked out the door and started heading for the hideout entrance, excited about the new job. End of POV. Now let us look at another who lives in a land forgotten by time. Salem sat on her thorn in silent contemplation. Over the past few days, she had seen an increase in the strange Grim appearing. She sent out her followers whenever she could to handle them, wiping out hundreds of them, yet she was no closer to finding out what was happening with them. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a child's laughter. Salem's head shot up, looking around, her eyes wide. She looked around her dark and sinister room, and it started to change. The room, once dark, was now bright. The floor that was once stone was now grass with trees all around. The sound of a children's laughter was getting louder, as if getting closer to her. She watched two small children burst out of the trees, one chasing the other, laughing joyfully. As they noticed her, they both smiled at her. She was about to run towards them but stopped when she heard talking behind her. Look at those two enjoying themselves like there isn't a care in the world. Oh, be quiet, dear. They are still children. What do they have to worry about? I agree with her, love. Let them be children for at least a little longer. Salem stood there frozen in place, not wanting to turn around. The voices were getting closer as the children continued to play. Even though she refused to turn, it was all for naught as three people came into her view, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing in front of her now was her old family. There was her before everything went downhill. Standing next to her was her husband before he had passed. And on the other side of him was her sister's wife before she became the bane of her existence. All were smiling while watching their children play and enjoy themselves. Salem stood there frozen, unable to move a step forward. She felt herself start hyperventilating. Salem had no idea what was going on and why she was being tormented by these cursed visions. She was on the verge of breaking down, tormented by her past happiness. The vision started to warp and change at all, going black until it was replaced by another vision. This time, only two people were there, and she recognized from the reports, a tall young man with forest green hair and a small girl with pure white hair and a small horn on her head. This was Izuku Sung and his daughter Eri. Salem watched as the two ran around and played Izuku, eventually catching up to the small girl and picking her up while spinning her around, causing her laughter to increase. The little girl let out a wonderful laugh that caused Salem's heart to clench in want. She felt a tear roll down her cheek as she watched the scene unfold before her, wanting to be there and enjoy herself with the two. As she watched, the two turned toward her, smiling like the sun and reaching out toward her, beckoning for her to come and join. Salem reached out towards the two, wanting to join them, and just as her hand was about to touch Izuku's outstretched hand, her vision went dark. She awoke, standing in her throne room, a hand out in the open air reaching for something that was not there. Tears started running down her face uncontrollably as she fell to the ground and let out a small, strangled whisper. More than anything, all I want is one more chance to be a mother, Salem said, clutching her hands to her chest and letting her silent tears fall down her face and hitting the floor. Let us return to the hero of this story. Igris was leading the large group towards where his liege was. It had taken longer than he had initially intended to gather all those searching for Princess Eri, and he had even stumbled across Miss Summer and Tiang while finding everyone. They had apparently come today to bring a package to their daughters, from what they told the Shadow Knight. For Igress's part, he did not believe for one second that was the only reason they had come today, but did not voice his thought, knowing that many in the group had feelings for his liege. So he remained silent and continued the task he was assigned. Once the group reached the clearing, the Shadow Knight heard multiple gasps from behind him. As the group walked into the clearing, they were met with a sight they thought they would never see. They saw Izuku, Ruby, Nora, and Eri lying against a giant bear they assumed was Izuku, given its coloring, with several Grimm scattered around them, either held by someone or lying on top of them. The group was about to charge forward, thinking something had happened to the three, but they were stopped when they heard someone talking. "About time you all showed up. Coco, you can't talk to teachers like that." Well, they were only supposed to be 30 minutes, according to Greenie, but somehow they managed to take 2 hours. I was starting to get bored. The group looked over to see 4 women sitting under a tree nearby. "So I think that justifies being a little rude, Velvet." "Even so, they are still teachers." Velvet scolded her team leader as the other group watched the exchange, confused about what was happening. "I hate to interrupt your argument, girls," Olivia said, stepping forward and gaining the attention of the two, "but could someone please explain what is going on here and why Mr. Izuku and company are under several Grimm?" "I got this," Coco said, looking at the others with her nah, and turned back towards the group and started explaining everything that had happened since Izuku first showed up in Velvet's hospital room till the group arrived. And that about sums up the entire thing. He said he had an idea for what to do with them but wanted to wait till you all arrived since he didn't want to explain it multiple times. "Any idea what it might be?" she asked, stepping forward. "No, ma'am, he didn't say anything, just said he was going to take a nap while he waited, and then the other two joined him, and they have been there since," Velvet said, looking towards the sleeping group with everyone else. "Well then, let's wake him up and figure out what the heck is going on and why he hasn't killed those Grimm yet," Yang said, walking forward with Lily and Summer to wake the three up. As they approached the sleeping three, they were brought up short as the Grimm that was once asleep started moving, stood before them, and started growling. The group jumped back and got into a fighting stance, ready to take out the tiny Grimm. Before either group could attack the other, they were stopped by a voice ringing out over the clearing. "Okay, that's enough, everyone." Both groups looked over to see Izuku awake and looking at them while "Izuku, Izu, Zuku, Zu, Greenie, Ku, Zuzu, Mr. Sung," the group said as they stood down along with the Grimm, who returned to their previous spot, much to the group's surprise. "Hello, you all. I am glad you could join us. I assume you know what's happening since you didn't immediately attack our new friends?" Izuku asked, standing up and stretching with Eri still asleep in his arms. "Yes, I am quite curious about what you will do with them because you were correct in assuming that I would not allow all of them onto my campus," Olivia said, walking forward to stand in front of Izuku with Glinda. "I assumed so, but let us wake up these two. Then I will explain my idea," Izuku said while he started gently poking Eri's cheek in an attempt to wake her up as Yang and Lily did the same to Nora and Ruby. All three woke up with a yawn which Izuku thought was adorable, and they started rubbing their eyes and looking around. "What's going on?" all three said in unison as they eventually focused on the group. "Hello, sleeping beauties. Did you all sleep well?" Izuku said, giving them a smile. "Actually, yes, Tank is very comfortable to sleep on," Ruby said, turning and hugging the giant bear's side. "I agree. I used to sleep on Tank a lot when I was younger," Izuku said with a sad but happy smile. "Now that everyone is here and awake, can you please explain your plan?" Olivia asked, walking over and taking Eri from Izuku's arms, much to the others' annoyance and jealousy. "Well, it is simple. Really they will stay in my home," Izuku said smiling. "What do you mean by having them stay in your home, Izu?" Summer said, tilting her head in confusion. "I didn't think you had a home here. That was why you stayed with us when you first arrived here." What do you mean first arrived here? Does he come from one of the other continents?" Coco asked her team, mirroring her question along with Port and Betty. "Ah, that's right, you four don't know my story yet," Izuku said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Well, for a long story short, I am not from this world." "What?" the six yelled. Yes, I know you probably have 1,000,001 questions for me now, and I promise I will answer them in time, but for now, let us focus on one thing at a time. Okay? Izuku said, looking at the 6 who nodded, accepting that for the time being. Thank you, Izuku said, giving them a smile, causing 4 of the 6 to blush. As for why I hadn't told you about my home when I first got here, I could not access it, given I was in a weakened state. Plus, Little Red here seemed excited to have me and Eri stay with you 3. Izuku said, putting a hand on Ruby's head and rocking it back and forth, causing her face to match her hair. Well, I can't argue with her decision. It was delightful having you and Eri living with us for the time. Summer said, with the other 3 nodding their head in agreement. While the others there were jealous hearing how Izuku had stayed with them. Glad to hear you all enjoyed my company. Now let's us get back on topic, Izuku said, removing his hand from Ruby's head, causing her to pout cutely. Well, let us get moving, shall we? As Izuku said that, a swirling vortex of energy formed behind him. Everyone took an involuntary step back as they watched in wide-eyed shock. Well, who wants to go first? Izuku said, taking a step out of the way of the portal. When no one volunteered to move forward, Izuku shrugged his shoulders and faced the portal, and without hesitation, walked through, leaving the group behind to look at each other. They all looked at each other and were shocked when the first person to go through the portal out of the group was the smallest one. Eri jumped out of Olivia's arms, and like her father, Eri did not hesitate as she walked through the portal. The Grimm quickly followed her, not wanting to be left behind. The rest of the group squared their shoulders and marched through the portal, following the little girl and their sworn enemies. As they appeared on the other side of the portal, they released a collective gasp of surprise as they stood on top of a tower surrounded by what seemed to be a small city. But that was not what shocked them. What surprised them was the dragons and wyverns flying around the tower. Welcome to the world of rest, Izuku said, throwing his arms out like a showman with a big smile. And welcome to my home, all of you. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and now we will see you in the next video.